Welcome to our channel, Hollywood Movie Review. Eastern Promises, 2007, Movie Review. Eastern Promises is a 2007 gangster crime thriller film directed by David Cronenberg and written by Stephen Knight. Starring Viggo Mortensen, Naomi Watts, Vincent Cassel, and Armin Mueller-Stahl, the film follows Anna Petrova Watts, a Russian-British midwife who delivers the baby daughter of a drug-addicted 14-year-old Russian prostitute named Tatiana. After Tatiana dies in childbirth, Anna reads the girl's diary and discovers that she was trafficked by the Russian mafia in London. When Semyon Mueller-Stahl, the leader of the mobsters and the owner of the Trans-Siberian restaurant, threatens the baby's life, Anna is warned off by both his immature son, Kirill Cassel, and his menacing bodyguard and driver, Nikolai Mortensen. Principal photography began in London on November 19, 2006, and concluded on February 16, 2007. The film has been noted for its treatment of the subject of sex trafficking, and for its violence and realistic depiction of Russian career criminals, which includes the detailed portrayal of the tattoos which indicate their crimes and criminal status. Eastern Promises premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival on September 8, 2007, where it won the People's Choice Award. The film was theatrically released in the United States and Canada on September 14, 2007, to critical acclaim, with particular praise for the performances of the cast. It was also a modest success at the box office, grossing $56.1 million against its $27 million production budget. Mortensen received numerous accolades for his performance, winning the Satellite Award for Best Actor in a Motion Picture, and was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Actor, the Golden Globe Award for Best Actor in a Motion Picture, Drama, the BAFTA Award for Best Actor in a Leading Role, the Critics' Choice Movie Award for Best Actor, and the Saturn Award for Best Actor. Anna Petrova, a Russian-British midwife who works at Trafalgar Hospital in London, finds a Russian-language diary belonging to Tatiana, a 14-year-old drug-addicted prostitute who is pregnant. When Tatiana suffers a placental abruption, Anna performs a cesarean section and delivers a baby girl, but Tatiana dies in childbirth. Not wanting the baby to end up in foster care, Anna sets out to track down Tatiana's family. Though Anna's British mother, Helen, is open to the idea, Anna's Russian uncle, Stepan, a former KGB officer, urges caution. While reading Tatiana's diary, Anna finds a business card for the Trans-Siberian restaurant and decides to meet with the owner, Semyon, who gives her a tour of the restaurant. Semyon is a seemingly kind older gentleman, but unbeknownst to Anna, he is a vor in the Russian mafia. When Anna tells Semyon about the diary, he offers to translate it, but she gives him a photocopy of the diary instead. Semyon's driver, Nikolai serves as the family cleaner and bodyguard of Kirill, Semyon's son. Kirill, a hedonistic drunk who repeatedly disappoints Semyon, authorizes a hit on Soyka, a rival Chechen leader, with the help of a Kurdish associate, Azim, without Semyon's approval. Upon finding Soyka's body stored in a freezer, Kirill spits on him, calling him a pederast, but Nikolai later tells Semyon that Soyka had been spreading rumors that Kirill is gay. Nikolai removes Soyka's wallet from his body and amputates his fingers to impede identification, which is then dumped in the Thames by Nikolai and Kirill. At a whorehouse, Kirill pressures Nikolai into having sex with one of the trafficked girls in order to prove that he's not gay. Nikolai chooses a Ukrainian girl referred to as Kirilenko, and the two have sex as Kirill watches. When Kirilenko reveals that she is from Irpin, a sympathetic Nikolai gives her some cash and a card, telling her to live longer. When Anna learns from Helen that Stepan had translated the diary without her knowledge, they tell her that Semyon raped Tatiana after Kirill failed to do so, explaining that he would show Kirill how to break her. The diary also states that Semyon gave her pills to induce an abortion, and Anna realizes that the baby was fathered by Semyon. When Semyon realizes that Anna knows the truth, he makes a disconcerting appearance in her hospital ward, which is off-limits to visitors. Frightened, Anna agrees to hand over the diary in exchange for the location of Tatiana's family. Anna, Stepan, and Helen meet with Nikolai at a fast food restaurant, where he takes the diary but denies knowing about revealing the family's address. As Nikolai is leaving, Anna confronts him and accuses the mafia of murdering Tatiana. After Stepan spits in Nikolai's face, Semyon burns the diary and orders Nikolai to kill Stepan, who goes missing. Semyon sponsors Nikolai as a full member due to his protection of Kirill and arranges a meeting with high-ranking members of the mafia. During the meeting, Nikolai, with his tattoos on display, reveals that he has no mother or father, was arrested at 15 for stealing auto parts, and was sent to solitary confinement numerous times, earning the nickname The Stump. Impressed, the mobsters promote Nikolai and he gets stars tattooed on his knees and chest. Meanwhile, Soyka's vengeful brothers arrive and kill Ikram, Azim's mentally disabled nephew whom Azim had forced to kill Soyka. Azim confesses his role in the hit to Semyon, whom he forgives in exchange for participating in a plan to save Kirill. After Azim lures Nikolai into a meeting at a public baths, the brothers, who are deceived into believing he is Kirill, ambush Nikolai. A fight ensues and the brothers stab Nikolai multiple times, but he manages to kill both of them before losing consciousness. Nikolai is rushed to Trafalgar for emergency surgery and survives as Anna waits for him to recover. Anna confronts Nikolai about Stepan's disappearance, threatening to go to the police if he refuses to speak. He tells her that Stepan is staying at the Caledonia, a 5-star hotel in Edinburgh, for his protection. Yuri, a Scotland Yard officer investigating the Russian mafia, arrives at Trafalgar and asks the receptionist for Nikolai. It is revealed that Nikolai is actually an undercover FSB agent working under license from the British government. When Yuri tells Nikolai that the Russian embassy has requested to terminate the undercover operation, Nikolai shows Yuri his newly acquired star tattoos. Nikolai tells Yuri to have Semyon arrested and charged with statutory rape, using a paternity test of Tatiana's baby as evidence. With Semyon in prison, this will allow Nikolai to support Kirill's ascension to head of the organization. As Anna finishes her shift, she spots Kirill entering an elevator with a large suitcase and finds that the baby is gone, replaced with a bouquet of roses. Assuming that Nikolai is involved, Anna confronts him and demands the baby's whereabouts, but he denies having knowledge about the kidnapping. The two rush to the spot on the Thames where Nikolai and Kirill had previously disposed of Soyka's body and find a tearful Kirill sitting by the river, having been ordered by his father to kill his baby sister. Nikolai and Anna persuade him to give the baby back and Nikolai embraces and consoles Kirill, telling him that Semyon is finished and that they will be taking control of the mafia. Anna and Nikolai share a kiss before he departs with Kirill to celebrate New Year's Day. Sometime later, Nikolai succeeds Semyon as head of the organization and Anna adopts Tatiana's baby, whom she names Christine. Shooting began in November 2006, and various scenes were filmed in St. John Street, Farringdon, London. Filming also took place in Broadway Market, Hackney and in Brompton Cemetery in the London borough of Kensington and Chelsea. The Trans-Siberian restaurant is located in the Farmelo Building, 34, St. John Street, next to Smithfield Market. This is the 6th most popular film and TV location in London, having also been used for Spooks, Penelope and Batman Begins. When Anna, her mother Helen, and her uncle Stepan meet Nikolai at a fast food restaurant, this was filmed in Bermondsey, southeast London at a Wimpy bar. The entrance to the Ankara Social Club of the film is actually the front door of a residential flat. The Broadway Market hairdresser known as Broadway Gents Hairstylist was changed to Azim's hair salon, where in the film one of the Russians is murdered. The owner Mr. Ismail Yesaloglu decided to keep most of the shop front after filming. In the original script, the name was Ozim's Hair Salon, but it was later changed to Azim's as there is no such name as Ozim in Turkish. The Trafalgar Hospital is actually the Middlesex Hospital, a hospital in the Fitzrovia area of London, which closed to patients in December 2005. The building in central London, which was knocked down in 2008, had the inscription Trafalgar Hospital, matching the style and apparent age of the old Middlesex Hospital, inserted into the legend above the main door. The fight scene in the Turkish baths was filmed on a custom set based on the Ironmonger Row baths in Islington. Eastern Promises was David Cronenberg's first film to be shot entirely outside Canada. Viggo Mortensen studied Russian gangsters and their tattoos. Mortensen spent a lot of time with a Russian mafia specialist, Gilly Mackenzie, organized crime specialist for the UN, and also consulted a documentary on the subject called The Mark of Cain, 2000. The tattoos that he wore, according to the New York Daily News, were so realistic that diners in a Russian restaurant in London fell silent out of fear, until Mortensen revealed his identity and admitted the tattoos were for a film. From that day on he washed off his tattoos whenever he went off the set. Mortensen said of the significance of the tattoos, "I talked to them about what they meant and where they were on the body, what that said about where they'd been, what their specialties were, what their ethnic and geographical affiliations were. Basically their history, their calling card, is their body." Consistent with the trademark violence in much of Cronenberg's work, Eastern Promises features a graphically violent fight scene in a steam bath where the combatants wield linoleum knives. When asked in an interview about the difference between gun violence and knife violence, Cronenberg replied, "We have no guns in this movie. There were no guns in the script. The choice of those curved knives we use in the steam bath was mine. They're not some kind of exotic Turkish knives, they're linoleum knives. I felt that these guys could walk around in the streets with these knives, and if they were ever caught, they could say we're linoleum cutters." Adam Naiman of iWeekly reported that director Cronenberg said, "Just don't give the plot away," and Naiman wrote, "His request is understandable." Naiman said there is one scene, the in-depth discussion of which prompted the director's anti-spoiler request referenced at the top of this story, that should rank not only in his personal pantheon of spectacularly deployed gore but among the most exhilaratingly visceral patches of cinema, period, full stop. Chicago Sun-Times critic Roger Ebert noted Cronenberg's quote and agreed, saying, "He is correct that it would be fatal, because this is not a movie of what or how, but of why. And for a long time you don't see the why coming." The film premiered on September 8, 2007, at the 2007 Toronto International Film Festival, where it won the Audience Prize for Best Film on September 15, 2007. Eastern Promises opened in limited release in Russia on September 13, 2007. In the United States and Canada, the film opened in limited release in 15 theaters on September 14, 2007, and grossed $547,092, averaging $36,472 per theater. The film opened in wide release in the United States and Canada on September 21, 2007, expanding to 1,404 theaters, and ranked number 5 at the box office, grossing $5,659,133, an average of $4,030 per theater. The film has grossed $56,106,607 worldwide as of March 17, 2019, $17,266,000 in the United States and Canada, and $38,840,607 in other territories. The film took part in competition at the San Sebastian Film Festival September 20, 2007. The film was shown at the London Film Festival on October 17, 2007, and was released in the United Kingdom on October 26, 2007. The review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes reported that 89% based on 198 reviews, with an average rating 7.70/10. The website's critical consensus reads, "David Cronenberg triumphs again, showcasing the Viggo Mortensen's on-screen prowess in a daring performance." Bearing the trademarks of psychological drama and gritty violence, Eastern Promises is a very compelling crime story. On Metacritic, the film has a weighted average score of 83 out of 100, based on 35 critics, indicating universal acclaim. Todd McCarthy of Variety, David Elliott of the San Diego Union Tribune, and film critic Tony Medley noted the twists in the film. Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times gave the film 4 out of 4 stars and wrote, "Eastern Promises is no ordinary crime thriller, just as Cronenberg is no ordinary director," and said that Cronenberg has moved film by film into the top rank of directors, and here he wisely reunites with Mortensen, who digs so deeply into the role you may not recognize him at first. Ebert said the film has a fight scene that sets the same kind of standard that the French Connection set for chases. Years from now, it will be referred to as a benchmark. Jay Hoberman of The Village Voice said, "I've said it before and hope to again, David Cronenberg is the most provocative, original, and consistently excellent North American director of his generation." Hoberman said the film is directed with considerable formal intelligence and brooding power, and continues the trend of murderous family dramas seen in Spider and A History of Violence. Hoberman called the film graphic but never gratuitous in its violence, garish yet restrained, a masterful mood piece, deceptively generic, and said the film suggests a naturalized version of the recent Russian horror flick Night Watch. When describing the cast, Hoberman said Mueller-Stahl may be perfunctory, but Vincent Cassel literally flings himself into his role, and Mortensen is even more electrifying as Nikolai than in A History of Violence. Chris Wagner of the Dallas Morning News gave the film a B+ and said the film's genius performance belongs to the venerable Armin Mueller-Stahl, who plays the family head with a twinkling eye and an air of avuncular, old-world charm. Wagner wrote, "Where some may see melodrama, Mr. Cronenberg locates timeless, elemental struggles between good and evil, right and wrong." but he makes sure to place a mysterious gray area front and center, personified here by Mr. Mortensen's Nikolai. Writing Nikolai Lizin is, like Ray Bradbury's Illustrated Man, only more dangerous and scarily enigmatic. Wagner wrote that Eastern Promises shares themes of ambiguous identity and rage-soaked duality with a history of violence, and said both films have a lockstep precision and both take a sly kind of joy in subverting genre expectations. Wagner said Eastern Promises is a little too mechanical for its own good, but the mechanics also produce an admirable crispness and sense of purpose, a sense that the man behind the camera knows exactly what he's doing at all times. Film Journal International critic Doris Timarkin said the film is a highly entertaining but sometimes revolting look at a particularly venal branch of the Russian mob. Timarkin wrote that Mortensen and Watts are intriguing moral counterpoints. They are also the key ingredients that make Eastern Promises a highly delectable and cinematically rich borscht that upscale film fans will devour. She described Mortensen's performance as startling, called Watts touching, Cassel particularly delicious, but said Mueller-Stahl, Cusack, and Skolimowski don't have as much to chew on. She said the film is also blessed by Howard Shore's restrained score, which lets the film's other estimable elements breathe through. Timarkin also said the film is essentially a character-driven crime thriller but is also a bloody tour de force laced with considerable nudity and sexually bold content that will rattle the squeamish. Bruce Westbrook of the Houston Chronicle gave the film 1 star out of 4 and said it had a contrived plot and wrote, "What it's really about, more than sensitivity for displaced people or social analyses, is violence, hideous, gruesome, over-the-top violence." Westbrook said for Cronenberg, such cheap sensationalism is business as usual, and this far into his career, that business has slipped into artistic bankruptcy. Westbrook wrote the film isn't about Russian gangs so much as Cronenberg's own dark passions, not just for violence but excruciating carnage, which he brandishes mercilessly, and that the film was a stifling descent into grim shock and disturbing awe. Eastern Promises won the Audience Prize for Best Film on September 15, 2007, at the 2007 Toronto International Film Festival. The film received 3 Golden Globe nominations for the 65th Golden Globe Awards, being nominated for Best Motion Picture Drama, Best Original Score and a Best Actor Motion Picture Drama nomination for Mortensen, but the film failed to win any. The film was nominated in 5 different categories in the British Independent Film Awards for 2007, and won in one category, Best Performance by an Actor in a British Independent Film, for Mortensen. Mortensen was also nominated for Academy Award for Best Actor at the 80th Academy Awards, but told the Associated Press, "If there's a strike I will not go." A reference to the ongoing Writers Guild of America strike. On February 12, 2008, the strike ended, and he attended the ceremony, although he lost the award to Daniel Day-Lewis for There Will Be Blood. Eastern Promises received 12 nominations at the 28th Genie Awards, tying with the film Shake Hands with the Devil for most nominations, and won 7, Best Supporting Actor, Mueller-Stahl, Screenplay, Cinematography, Editing, Musical Score, Overall Sound, Sound Editing. It was also the last TIFF People's Choice Award winner to not win any of its Oscar nominations until Steven Spielberg's The Fabelmans in 2022. Speaking in August 2010, Cassel said that a sequel was discussed with Cronenberg whilst they were filming A Dangerous Method. Cassel suggested that the sequel will be filmed in Russia with Cassel and Mortensen reprising their roles. In April 2012, producer Paul Webster told Screen International that a sequel was in the works, which would reunite director Cronenberg, writer Knight, and actor Mortensen. The film was said to be made by Webster's new production company Shoebox Films in collaboration with Focus Features and was to begin production in early 2013. That August, however, Cronenberg stated that Eastern Promises 2 is dead. "We were supposed to start shooting Eastern Promises 2 in October, but it's done. If you don't like it, talk to James Scamus at Focus." It was his decision. On December 2, 2020, Knight revealed that the sequel became the upcoming separate Martin Zandvoort film Small Dark Look starring Jason Statham, Our Bodies Tell Stories. Every bruise alludes to an action. Each scar describes a trauma. Inside, blood and DNA chart family history and imply a heritage, the knowledge of which may draw us closer to our past. David Cronenberg's Eastern Promises explores how the body preserves identity. But in the 2007 film written by Stephen Knight, physical signifiers also deceive and keep secrets. Following Cronenberg's A History of Violence, 2005, Viggo Mortensen plays another enigmatic character with a violent past. Mortensen is Nikolai, a functionary in the Russian mob in London, the Voryvy, meaning thieves-in-law, whose elaborate tattoos, acquired in a Siberian prison, read like a resume of his past crimes inscribed on skin paper. More than body art, his tattoos convey both the misdeeds that earned them and the guile of their creation. Yet, along with Nikolai's corporeal vita, little is what it appears to be in the film, especially the outward promise of freedom in the West. Beyond the film's eroticized violence and secretive world among the brutal Russian gangsters, Cronenberg also tells an immigrant story about people who want a better life only to find their yearning exploited. They have arrived in contemporary London only to face a Dickensian, unforgiving, and violent underworld. Eastern Promises opens with two traumatic scenes, and Night, no stranger to literary symbolism, sets them on December 20th, the eve of the darkest day of the year. The first scene in a London barbershop involves the gruesome throat-slicing hit of a soldier in the Chechen mob. The next scene finds Tatiana, Sarah Jean Labrosse, a 14-year-old addict, barefoot, bleeding, and going into labor. Tragically, Tatiana dies, leaving Anna, Naomi Watts, the midwife who delivered the baby, to search for a relative to keep the baby out of the foster system. She finds Tatiana's diary in the maternity ward and, inside, discovers a card for the Trans-Siberian restaurant, then visits the owner, Semyon, Armin Mueller's stall, to ask for help. Although he appears gentle and soft-spoken with kind eyes, Semyon is a godfather-like patriarch of the Voryvy, unbeknownst to Anna. His organization thrives on human trafficking, drugs, and prostitution, among other vices. Not only is he responsible for Tatiana's exploitation, but he trafficked her from Russia, then raped and impregnated her before installing her in his sex trade. Hiding this fact, Semyon presents himself as a kindly figure, offering to teach Anna about her Russian roots while agreeing to translate Tatiana's diary. However, when Anna brings Semyon photocopies of the diary's pages, he asks where she lives and insists on getting the original so that he can destroy the evidence of his criminality. Eastern Promises frames Anna's search for Tatiana's family as an act of personal healing after her own trauma. Part Russian on her father's side, Anna lives with her mother, Sinead Cusack, while recovering from a recent breakup and miscarriage. Her irascible uncle Stepan, Polish director Jerzy Skolimowski, an ex-KGB operative, escaped his former life for the promises of the so-called Free West. He believes Anna should take Tatiana's diary and bury her secrets with her bodies, a loaded mispronunciation, to be sure. A racist and traditionalist, Stepan remains disillusioned by London's corruption, portrayed by Cronenberg and cinematographer Peter Sashitsky in Grey, empty urban spaces across a damp, indifferent metropolis. The setting of immigrant communities struggling in an exploitative abyss cannot help but recall another Night Pen story, 2002's Dirty Pretty Things, directed by Stephen Frears, wherein immigrants find themselves preyed upon by black market organ traffickers. When Stepan translates the diary and confirms the worst about Semyon, Anna recognizes the everyday cruelty that inhabits London, Tatiana's would-be promised land. This glimpse at Anna's home life, along with Tatiana's fate, underscores the title's reference to the false promises made in the East about the opportunities in the West. Night weaves together efficient plotting and complex characters in just 100 minutes, balancing Anna's search for answers with two intensifying conflicts, the war between Russian and Chechen mobs, and questions about Semyon's successor. His unpredictable son, Kirill, Vincent Cassel, has ignited the mafia conflict with an unauthorized hit of a man who spread rumors about Kirill's drinking and sexuality. In Cronenberg's portrait of this all-male subculture, accented by homoeroticism, everyone appears to be family yet viciously competing and controlling one another. Semyon comes to rely on Nikolai, Kirill's driver and bodyguard, to keep his son out of trouble. However, the relationship between Kirill and Nikolai is more complex than an employer-employee relationship. Kirill calls Nikolai a brother and partner, yet he also orders Nikolai around like a servant. Note the scene where Kirill's twisted sense of camaraderie demands that Nikolai have sex with a prostitute while he watches, seemingly to prove that Nikolai isn't gay and thus good enough for his father's syndicate. Throughout the film, the touching between Kirill and Nikolai walks the line between brotherly and flirtatious, with arms around the shoulders and slaps on the butt, though Cronenberg doesn't shed light on whether Nikolai is manipulating Kirill in these terms or feels genuine empathy or both. Kirill's repressed sexual curiosity about Nikolai stems from his father's vocal homophobia, resulting in a disturbed character whose identity is criminal but tragic. Although Eastern Promises eschews Cronenberg's usual science fiction and horror narrative elements, Cronenberg doesn't forgo bodily themes. Here, Nikolai's tattoos are symbols, raw and visible. Russian prisoners tattoo their life stories onto their bodies. The tattoos signify their crimes, where they served, and what qualifies them for their membership in the Vory Zakoni. Whatever the tattoo shows must be true. As Nikolai earns Semyon's trust, he undergoes a ritualized screening process, standing before several mob figures and bearing his tattoos, thereby revealing himself. Curiously, the tattoo theme wasn't in Knight's original script. During his research for the role, Mortensen discovered the relationship between Russian gangsters and tattooing from the 2003 book Russian Criminal Tattoo and the documentary The Mark of Cain, 2001. When Mortensen brought the concept to Cronenberg, the director found the practice a generous symbolic theme and worked with Knight to rewrite the script with Mortensen's research. But Nikolai's body lies. His tattooing is part of an elaborate undercover case for the Russian FSB, formerly KGB, to destabilize the Vory Zakoni in London. Although Nikolai's body suggests tangible proof of his criminal worth, both in terms of the tattoos it bears and as a singular physical specimen, Cronenberg scholar Ernest Mathages notes that his fraud undermines the stereotypically masculine sense of authenticity and heroism associated with the survival of painful ordeals and danger. Sure enough, when Nikolai is awarded the tattooed stars of a Vor on his chest, it's so Semyon can redirect Kirill's Chechen enemies to kill Nikolai instead of his son. Whatever deception Nikolai's tattoos contain, he demonstrates his skills in the unforgettable, gasp-inducing fight in a Turkish bathhouse. Kirill's hasty assassination of his slanderer causes a series of reprisals, one of which finds Nikolai attacked. Mortensen insisted that he performed the sequence naked and vulnerable, almost like a Greek athlete performing in the earliest Olympic Games. Bearing all, Mortensen's naked character savagely fights off two thugs in the bathhouse. Everything suggested by Nikolai's tattoos is confirmed here, making the subsequent reveal of his deception all the more shocking, since his raw, masculine violence is unleashed with unrelenting savagery. Cronenberg admitted the script described the scene as two men come in with knives and there's a fight. The details, the nakedness, steam, fight choreography, and curved linoleum knives, came from the director working them out with Mortensen, Sashitsky, stunt coordinators, and production designer Carol Spire. Some critics claimed the scene marked Cronenberg's comic indulgence in borderline horror genre violence, some claimed the scene emphasized the film's homoeroticism, and some argued that the scene's convincing physicality, along with other moments of violence in the film, suggested the story's place in the real world. Anthony Lane asked in The New Yorker, "Why go that far? Must he cling to his schlocky reputation at all costs?" Doubtless, the reality of actual gang violence looks much worse than Cronenberg portrays. Still, the Canadian auteur has never been one to shy away from the physical reality of his subjects, especially where violence and sex are concerned. Moreover, the violence is not without purpose. It reveals the unrelenting physical punishment Nikolai must endure for his undercover mission. Mortensen even manages a darkly comic tone to Nikolai throughout the fight scene, captured in his almost disgruntled expressions, as though he understands what has happened and why, and furthermore, knows what's in store. After surviving the ordeal, he orders Semyon to be arrested for statutory rape, using the baby's DNA as evidence. But Semyon has already ordered Kirill to dispose of the child. Nikolai and Anna rush to the scene to stop him, and they find Kirill breaking down over nearly losing his friend and being ordered to kill a child. "You're either with him or with me," Nikolai tells him. The two embrace like old friends and, perhaps, imminent lovers. But the connections between Nikolai and Anna remain more substantive. Eastern Promises draws a parallel between Anna and Nikolai as outsiders and survivors. Neither character belongs to the ritualized Russian culture on display in the film. Anna feels some faint connection to her heritage through her father and uncle, but her experience with Semyon dissuades her. Nikolai pretends to belong, wearing a figurative mask to infiltrate the inner circle. So naturally, Knight arranges for a romantic flourish at the end, hinting at what might have been in a makeshift family between Nikolai, Anna, and Tatiana's baby. In their discussion of a history of violence and Eastern Promises, scholars Aaron Dunlap and Joshua Delpech-Rami note the place of women in Cronenberg's earlier films as passive victims of either experiment or psychosis. They are either spectators to or accomplices with the inchoate, irrational, and alien materialities that men attempt to control. However, they acknowledge that women have more agency in these films as male characters move from horror to fascination to acceptance of the grotesque. In Eastern Promises, Anna works in union with Nikolai, even though his true identity remains elusive, almost non-existent to the viewer. Neither Anna nor the viewer learns Nikolai's real name. His past, evidenced by his tattoos, is a complete fabrication. His future, promised by the stars tattooed on his chest, is false, since Nikolai hopes to attain the rank to have it removed. How can I become king, if the king is still in place, he asks. Nikolai is not a hero who ascends to the role of a mob boss but a figure of deception. We see no true Nikolai, not even when he is stripped bare. There is only a series of false truths and yet unrealized objectives. Whereas Nikolai remains trapped in his body, which is reshaped to propel a deception, thus never his true self, Anna presents a bold alternative. Dunlap and Dalpec Rami describe Anna as a gorgeous study in the enigmatic nature of subtle heroism. Riding around London in high leather boots on a motorbike, Anna takes direct and unwavering action. In Lacanian psychoanalytic terms, Nikolai has emasculated himself by performing in a symbolic, indirect way through his undercover ruse and false history inscribed by his tattoos. By contrast, Anna adopts a traditionally more masculine role through her willingness to face conflict head-on rather than in symbolic terms. Her initial intention to rescue Tatiana's baby, regardless of whether it stems from her stereotypically feminine role as a midwife, situates her in the traditional masculine hero role. Anna is wholly unique in Cronenberg cinema, which tends to focus on men and women in relation to men. Moreover, she remains one of the film's only characters who is what she appears to be. Semyon presents himself as a restaurateur to hide his criminal enterprise. Kirill pretends to be heterosexual to disguise his likely queerness. Nikolai adopts a false front to convince everyone he's a career criminal. The film's world of men is deceptive, making Eastern Promises an uncharacteristically feminist entry in Cronenberg's filmography. Even Tatiana's phantom voiceover from her diary situates the narrative as looking onto a male-dominated world from a feminine perspective. If Eastern Promises begins as a film about the Russian mafia, it ends as a complex character study less interested in the machinations of criminal organizations. Cronenberg focuses on people who disguise themselves in various ways or who exist as outsiders. As ever, the director remains fascinated by deviations of the body, institutions, and social norms. And anchored by one of Knight's best scripts, he would go on to write Spencer, 2021, Allied, 2016, and create TV's Peaky Blinders, 2013 to 2022. Eastern Promises shows Cronenberg's ability to develop material to suit his preoccupations. The film also marks a stunning inclusion in his filmography, his second collaboration with Mortensen, who disappears into his role and brings an unsettling authenticity to every deliberate gesture. After viewing Eastern Promises once and learning its secrets, Mortensen's performance rewards additional screenings with his outward control that nonetheless bears faint micro-gestured hints at his identity. Indeed, similar to A History of Violence, Cronenberg imbues a seemingly straightforward and commercial crime story with substance and layers as only a master filmmaker could. Dark, somber, bleak, and brutally powerful, Eastern Promises is the latest disturbingly violent piece of poetry from master filmmaker David Cronenberg, A History of Violence. An arresting marvel of storytelling and substance, this pitch-black parable of history, tradition, family, and vengeance is a hardcore thriller ranking amongst this director's finest achievements. It is also one of the year's best motion pictures. Much like all Cronenberg creations, the film is also not for the squeamish and is guaranteed to polarize audiences. This saga of the Russian mafia secretly controlling the streets of London while a lone midwife seeks to find answers as to why a pregnant 14-year-old girl died childbirth goes straight for the jugular, literally and figuratively, and doesn't pull a single punch. Stephen Knight's screenplay is a twisted barnburner, and much like his script for Dirty Pretty Things, there is an emotional bleakness to the narrative that left me feeling dirty as I exited the theater. But I like stories that challenge the viewer, structured around complex characters who all have something interesting to say. This drama is a moving thriller overflowing with subtle nuances and deft characterizations. It fearlessly stares into the heart of darkness, forcing the audience to stare right back whether they are comfortable doing so or not. Naomi Watts is excellent as the midwife Anna. She's desperate to discover the secrets buried within the diary of a dead teenager, never quite fully understanding the murderous repercussions her investigation will inadvertently generate. Armin Mueller-Stahl has his best role since his Oscar-nominated turn in Shine as a Russian restaurant owner, demonic, bloodthirsty rage clandestinely hiding behind the kindly visage of a puttering old man. Vincent Cassel is also quite good as this man's son, but Knight's storytelling does him few favors, the film leaving his character something of a nonsensical enigma by the time things reach a conclusion. Viggo Mortensen is the metaphorical force of nature dominating all aspects of the production. Playing Cassel's best friend, confidant, driver, and protector, the actor buries himself so deep inside his role I almost forgot I was watching the same man who previously brought disparate characters like Aragorn, Frank Hopkins, and Tom Stahl to such vigorous life. This is a daring performance, Mortensen stripping himself physically and emotionally naked for everyone to see. He's magnificent. Cronenberg directs with confidence, letting things uncoil organically. Frequent cinematographer Peter Sashitsky's Shopgirl camera glides throughout the story's milieu as if it were a silent observer transmitting its observations with elegiac intimacy. Cronenberg punctuates this ethereal surveillance with pungent spurts of violence and adrenaline, a brawl inside a bathhouse, one of the more jarring and deeply unsettling fight sequences I've ever seen. Things do wrap themselves up a bit too nicely, while a certain twist as it pertains to a character's allegiances isn't much of a surprise. But these are small problems. Cronenberg ends things on a coda that's as reassuring as it is chilling, deep longing loneliness mixed with warm-hearted happiness, everything melding together to produce a gut punch of a climax that knocked me sideways. Eastern Promises is impossible to forget. David Cronenberg is a filmmaker that divides opinion, splitting the consensus due to his overbearing need to shock his viewers. The Baron of Blood is an acquired taste, let's mention that before this begins. However, it's mainly for his sci-fi films and their interpretation of gore and violence, which he intertwines with the psychological and the utterly bizarre. Let it be said though, films such as Videodrome, 1983, and The Fly, 1986, are now considered classics of the genre. I am a big fan of both. But who would have thought it? The man who quickly became known as a body horror auteur found even greater success during a 2-year spell from 2005 to 2007 that consisted of the director's 2 greatest films in his lengthy portfolio. A History of Violence, 2005, and Eastern Promises, 2007, the latter of which is celebrating its 15th birthday this month, are 2 of the most underrated crime thrillers of the century. They are both electrifying, filled with unrequited tension and angst, but not to stray too far from what he knows. The 2 films' interpretation of violence and body horror are second to none, albeit watered down slightly, for a Cronenberg film that is. Although it would a treat to revisit both films, Eastern Promises is the reason we are here. It's a London gangster thriller that is shocking, as well as a truthful depiction of the city's crime-riddled streets. The wonderful thing about Eastern Promises turning 15, damn, doesn't time fly, is how well it's aged in that time. It is one of those films that still gets people talking, whether that be due to its narrative twist, the dark subject matter at its slimy best, or the poetic violence that fleetingly dances in between scenes. We'll get to that later though. However, the undeniable fact that will always be spoken about regarding this film is the acting clinic by the now Cronenberg regular, Viggo Mortensen. Aside from the worldwide recognition Mortensen received from the Lord of the Rings trilogy, his work in Eastern Promises has also become synonymous with his career. It does so in a brilliantly established way that consists of such wonderful variety. The actor's performance as the cold-hearted and morally ambiguous Russian mob enforcer Nikolai is the most amazing transformation, and possibly the greatest acting achievement in his career. A deserved Oscar nomination came his way that year, and if it wasn't for Daniel Day-Lewis' exceptional work in There Will Be Blood, he might have walked away with the top honor. As is the case with the majority of Cronenberg films, violence is key to the film's success because of how shocking and memorable the representation is. And let's be real here, it's a symphony of the highest order. But something often overlooked, though it's as effective in creating atmosphere, is the eerie voiceover that echoes throughout the film. The voice belongs to Tatiana Maslany. She's the tragic young girl who loses her life during the film's opening, and a character that determines the rest of the film. Tatiana retells her tragic story, with bright hopes of becoming a dancer before walking down the wrong path. She moves to England, becoming involved in a world she had no right being in. It results in her attack, pregnancy, and eventual death. In a film so focused on violence, have words ever been so impactful and heartbreaking as they are here? But as we all know, Cronenberg stitches the events of the film carefully together to build the foundations for two specific sequences that live long in the memory and occur purposefully back to back. And not forgetting, each scene also consists of Mortensen with little to no clothes on. The first is of the two scenes, and something that is spoke about earlier in the film, is the giving of the star's initiation ceremony as Nikolai is accepted into the family. Nikolai's robot-like approach to the grilling he receives from the 5 Russian bosses is chilling. I am dead already. I died when I was 15, and now I live in the zone all the time is about as cool as you can sound while sitting in your underpants. What makes this sequence so symbolic is the ruthless relationship it shares with the next scene, arguably the most iconic fight scene of the century. Along with Mortensen being completely naked, this sequence is poetic in authenticity and sheer violence. He is a man fighting against odds and fighting for his life. He is willing to use whatever prison tactics his turbulent life has taught him. Not only is Cronenberg's skill for interpreting violence prominent here, but it's the moment when everything comes clear. It's a realization that the importance of the initiation meant diddly squat to the man at the helm. The ruthless Russian mob boss Semyon's, Armin Mueller-Stahl, only quest is to save himself and his son, Kirill, Vincent Cassel. With all this clarity, the film's questions of morality become enlightened. The winds have changed direction, and these two scenes are key for the whole thing. With all this clarity now in the air, the film's powerful questions of morality now become enlightened. The winds are swiftly changing direction, and these two scenes are key for the whole thing. The success of Eastern Promises, especially coming off the back of A History of Violence, is something quite rare. Cronenberg's failed to recapture the magic of these thrillers in any of his future projects, and God knows he's tried. Eastern Promises also benefits from the great relationship Cronenberg has with the film's screenwriter, Stephen Knight. He's a man whose skill at manipulating the narratives of the crime genre has since made him a household name. Whatever argument one can make for the film's undeniable acclaim over the years, one thing is for sure, and that's the fact that Eastern Promises is one of the most iconic crime thrillers of the century. Viggo Mortensen is a damn contortionist of the face. He stretches and twists that motherfucker from regular Viggo face into badass Russian gangster face. His eyebrows and the lines on his forehead turn into an arch. His mouth twists and curls into an arrogant smirk. The slash-like lines on his cheekbones suck extra deep into his skull. I could have sworn the motherfucker even created a dimple on his chin somehow, like through some weird breathing technique, but I checked photos and it turns out he already had that. But it fits his character well. That's just the chin dimple a Russian gangster like that would have. After all those years of great supporting performances, and then hitting the lottery by being the king that returned in Return of the King, now he is getting the roles he was born for. A History of Violence is my favorite of his movies so far, so I'm glad he's re-teaming with Dave Cronenberg here. Hopefully they will continue to collaborate for at least one more movie. It could be known as the Cronenberg Gangster Trilogy. I think this is a really good, smart, and original movie. But I don't want to talk it up too much. Part of the appeal is the subtlety. It leaves a lot of things unsaid, it's pretty short and it's small in scope. It deals with a family of Russian gangsters, but it doesn't feel like an empire. They live in London, after all, and all the activity is centralized at one restaurant. In fact, I'm a little surprised that the reactions aren't more divided. I heard nothing but good things from all the people I talked to who saw it before me, so I bet you'll like it too. But still, you can't go in expecting The Godfather, which is what the critics' quotes in some of the ads ask you to do. I heard a radio ad with a quote that was something like Francis Ford Coppola, Martin Scorsese, and now David Cronenberg can be added to the list of directors of the greatest gangster movies of all time. That's kind of a cheating quote because it might be literally true, but you fucking know it sounds like you're saying this movie is as good as The Godfather and Goodfellas. So you get to go into the hyperbole and then say you didn't mean it. So I was hoping maybe to do a quote like Eastern Promises makes The Godfather look like the fucking Boondock Saints. Or maybe Eastern Promises makes Goodfellas look like Corky Romano or Jane Austen's Mafia. But one of my buddies told me I should just leave people scratching their heads with Eastern Promises makes The Godfather look like Goodfellas. So that's my quote for the DVD cover, Focus Features. Please use a large font. Anyway, the movie stars Naomi Watts as a London midwife whose father was Russian, who happens to be there when a young prostitute dies during childbirth. She finds the girl's diary, in Russian, and wants to get it translated so she can find out who the girl's family is before the baby goes to an orphanage. But of course there are secrets in that diary that Russian gangsters don't want her to know, and she gets into trouble. I love Naomi Watts, she does a fine job and she looks cute in her motorcycle gear. But at least on my initial viewing I felt like this wasn't her movie, this was stolen by the men. You got Armin Mueller-Stahl as the owner of the Russian restaurant. Somehow he plays it entirely as a kindly old man on the surface while being completely menacing. There are perfectly uncomfortable scenes where he keeps trying to get her to give him the diary while trying to seem like he's not threatening her, and she either doesn't pick up on it or knows how to play it cool like she doesn't pick up on it. Then there is his son Kirill, played by Vincent Cassel. I think this is one of the best performances I've seen by that guy. He does an amazing combination of jolly, crazed, hurt, jealous, cruel, in love, and repressed. And his face is so weird looking. Great performance plus weird looking face equals classic. But of course the guy everybody is gonna remember is Viggo as Nikolai. He's Kirill's driver/mortician, and at first it seems like the type of supporting role that Viggo did for so many years before Lord of the Rings. But he becomes more central to the movie the more it goes along. You sort of think of him as the main character ultimately, but a lot of what's going on with his character is never spelled out. I have plenty of ideas about what he wants, but it's sort of up to interpretation, or at least they purposely leave it unexplained. There's one particularly memorable scene that would just about be a shoo-in for some kind of outlaw award if they happen to occur this year. I wouldn't want to give it away, but it's been mentioned in every review I've seen in the movie, so I already knew about it going in, and you probably do too. This is not an action movie, but it's kind of like Takeshi Kitano, where it occasionally explodes into bursts of brutal violence. And there's one amazing fight scene in a bathhouse. Roger Ebert and others have declared it a landmark scene, and I was worried I would have to be the asshole pointing out that 50 Cent already did an amazingly realistic prison shower fight scene in his otherwise pretty crappy Get Rich or Die Tryin' movie. Fortunately, the Eastern Promises scene doesn't have the same feel at all. What it does have is the dude from Lord of the Rings fighting two guys while butt-ass naked. And there's not any Austin Powers type tricks here, he's got the balls swinging the whole time. I hate to say no pun intended, but it took balls to do this scene. Holy shit. I think Viggo has a real good shot at an Oscar nomination for this, I hope he gets it. There's all the surface reasons, the fact that he speaks Russian, does a Siberian accent and accurate broken English, the way he physically transforms himself with his expressions and the way he carries himself. Then there's the more interior reasons, the way he plays this scary guy but then shows his other side, the way he implies other secrets. It's a hell of a performance, with so many dimensions to it, but hopefully the Oscar clip will be him naked stabbing a dude in the eye. It's a movie that's hard to peg. It's not weird like you expect from Cronenberg, but it's not a traditional thriller either. It has a plot twist that I suspected long ahead of time, but I wasn't sure if I was ahead of the movie or right where it wanted me to be. A lot of people have told me the ending was abrupt, but I thought it was perfect. For one character it's happy, for another it's victorious, but also ironic and sad. And it does kind of feel like the end of Chapter 1. They could definitely do another movie, and I would be excited to see it. But I also have to wonder if maybe the continuing story should just be implied. Sort of like how the end of The Matrix leaves you wanting to see the revolution, but most people now probably realize they should have left it to their own imaginations. One thing for sure though, I keep thinking about this movie and will have to see it again. I think it has a lot of things that seem small and unimportant that looking back are very significant. Here's an example. I'll be kind of vague so it won't give too much away, but if you've seen it you'll know what I'm talking about. There's a quick little part where Anna's uncle makes a horribly offensive comment, she gets upset and storms out. It completely works as just a moment, a weird uncomfortable thing that happens and makes the uncle flawed. But then if you go back and think about it, it accomplishes a whole lot of storytelling in that one moment. Most important is that it gives us a piece of Anna's history that makes us understand why she is so attached to this baby. At the same time, it establishes the relationships between Anna, her uncle, and her mom. And it gives her a reason to trust the other Russian family when she should stick with her own. And not only that, it sets up this theme of the old-school Russian ways, that they can be backwards and prejudiced, so that also pretty much explains Kirill's entire character and why he does everything he does throughout the movie. Think about it. So that one little goofy part that seems almost random is actually a crucial piece of the machinery. But it leaves a lot for you to puzzle over. For example, what the hell does the title mean? Okay, I get the Eastern part, but what about the promises? In the sense that it's hard to figure out the title fits the movie well. So I guess this is more of a critic's movie or an art house movie than a mainstream crowd pleaser. But I suspect it will make at least a small dent in pop culture thanks to rappers and their fascination with gangsters. It's not gonna be Godfather or Scarface popular, but maybe in that area a little below Carlito's Way. If I'm right, that's kind of interesting because Russians have never been considered cool in America. Their image took a beating during the Cold War, especially in the 80s when they were called commies or Ruskies and were the go-to bad guys in action movies. They were evil and mostly faceless, personality-less. With the possible exception of Ivan Drago, there wasn't even a bad guy Russian that it was cool to like a Darth Vader. I don't think Drago even counts. I don't know who was rooting for him. Even today, Russian gangsters are just cheesy villains in DTV action movies. As far as good guy Russians, all we had was Yakov Smirnov. And I don't know about you, but I never realized that guy was really Russian. I thought it was a character like Father Guido Sarducci. This movie not only has a great badass Russian, it has a fascination with this whole world of Russian gangster traditions, in particular the symbolism of their prison tattoos. So there will finally be something about Russians that Americans will think is cool. Wait, maybe Nikolai Volkov from the WWF, he was a Russian bad guy character that people liked. But he's gonna be surpassed by this new Nikolai, I guarantee it. 9 years ago, I saw for the first time the crime thriller directed by David Cronenberg called A History of Violence. Viggo Mortensen had starred in the movie, portraying a happily married cafe owner whose good Samaritan actions against two thugs led to his disclosure as a former mob enforcer. Both Cronenberg and Mortensen reunited 2 years later to collaborate on another crime thriller called Eastern Promises. Based upon a screenplay written by Steve Knight, Eastern Promises began with a gangland murder and the death of a 14-year-old Russian-born prostitute after giving birth to an infant girl. The two incidents would resonate over the lives of a London hospital midwife of Russian descent named Anna Katrova, Naomi Watts, a Russian mob boss and restaurant owner named Semyon Armin Mueller-Stahl, his wastrel son Kirill, Vincent Cassel, and the mob boss enigmatic chauffeur, Nikolai Lizin, Mortensen. The plot is a little too complex for me to explain in this review. Needless to say that it centered around the mob boss' attempt to recover the dead prostitute's diary, which found itself in the hands of the hospital midwife. I would suggest that one find a way to see the movie. It will not disappoint. I know I found it very interesting. Yes, it has violence, but not as much that was found in A History of Violence. But the amount of blood shown in the film, especially in the gangland slaying and the prostitute's death, seemed to like a metaphor of the story's theme and the connection between the major characters. On the surface, Eastern Promises seemed like a typical crime thriller centered around a Russian crime family in London. But the plot, like three of the major characters, turned out to be something quite different than what appears to be on the surface. What seemed like a gang war turned out to be a lurid family secret that brings down the Russian mobster. As I had earlier pointed out, this theme is also apparent in 3 of the 4 major characters. And it is through the eyes of the London midwife, Anna, that the audience becomes acquainted with the exotic, at least for American and British eyes, world of Russian émigrés mingled with the violence and degeneracy of the Vory v. Zakwan, Russian mafia. Thanks to Cronenberg's direction, the world of the Vory v. Zakwan seems so exotic and something never seen before. In fact, it seems so insular that the usual British atmosphere of London almost seemed miles away, despite the presence of Scotland Yard. One sequence that came to mind is the hand-to-hand fight between Nikolai and 2 Chechen assassins seeking revenge for the gangland murder featured in the movie's opening scene. The sight of a nude Mortensen viciously defending his life against 2 burly assassins inside a London bathhouse is one that I will never forget. And I suspect that it will become an unforgettable scene in the minds of moviegoers for years to come. I was also impressed by the performances in the movie. Despite having the least interesting character, Watts managed, with her usual competency, to infuse pathos and spirit into the London midwife. And Mueller-Stahl did an excellent job of portraying a brutal and ruthless man who manages to hide these traits under a veneer of warmth and civility. But I feel that Cassel deserves an Oscar nod for his portrayal of the pathetic Krill, who tries to hide his weaknesses, or what he conceives as weakness, with a crude and extroverted persona. Finally, there is Viggo Mortensen, whose portrayal of the enigmatic Nikolai might finally allow the critics to truly appreciate his skills as an actor. Instead of using words or openly expressed emotions, Mortensen manages to reveal his character to the audience through subtle words, in a Russian accent that surprisingly works, body language, costume, and especially in his eyes. What makes Mortensen so remarkable as a film actor is that he has no need for big speeches, which he had attempted in Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, or outbursts of emotions to express his character's personalities. This certainly seemed true in the scene in which Nikolai has sex with one of the prostitutes, in the whorehouse owned by Krill's father. Nikolai does not simply have sex with the woman. He is forced to do so. On the orders of Krill, who wants Nikolai to prove that he is not a homosexual. The audience was well aware that the prostitute felt violated and exploited. But Mortensen managed to convey through his eyes Nikolai's feelings of violation, exploitation, and disgusted Krill's desire to watch him have sex with the prostitute. Good performances by Mortensen, Cassel, and the actress who portrayed the prostitute. What else can I say about Eastern Promises? It is not the best movie I have seen this year. But I feel that it is a fascinating and emotionally complex story that seems different from the usual crime thriller. Unlike A History of Violence, it is not capped by a violent sequence that gives us the last word on the protagonist's fate. Yet, all the same, I found it very tense and emotional. Nobody likes to call a practically perfect genre film that whirs along with the inerrant precision of a Swiss watch hackwork, so let me instead suggest that Eastern Promises continues the evolution begun in Spider and A History of Violence, whereby David Cronenberg is redefining himself as an exceptionally gifted director of essentially non-Cronenbergian films. That hardly means that the films are any kind of bad, but when I read of the director admitting in interviews that he made Eastern Promises largely because it was the project he could get funded, I don't feel shock or disappointment so much as confirmation. This is a film that feels, except for a few choice moments, like the work of a slightly bored craftsman phoning it in. Even though, God knows, Cronenberg phoning it in is several orders of magnitude greater than most of his colleagues. Eastern Promises could as well be titled A People's Glorious History of Violence. It is content to echo the director's last film and theme, with the change that this time the country whose violent psychic scars are being torn open is Russia, not America. Then again, the story takes place in the same grimy London underworld of immigrants that housed screenwriter Stephen Knight's Dirty Pretty Things. Like that story, Eastern Promises centers on an innocent, the half-Russian hospital midwife Anna, Naomi Watts, through whose eyes we are introduced to the squalid mise en scene. This time we also get a surrogate on the inside, mob enforcer Nikolai, Viggo Mortensen, who literally carries a history of violence on his back. If there's one thing that Cronenberg is noted for, it's his obsession with bodily mortification, particularly as it relates to sex, or at least the sex organs. In his last film, that largely meant lots of blood, but here it crops up in the metaphorically weighty tattoos that Nikolai wears across his back, chest, and arms. We are told that these tattoos are given in Russian prisons, and that they tell a history of the bearer, where he has been, who he has known, what he has done. They are biography, they are the markers of a life in sin. It's typical of the director's preoccupations that the evil men do in life should take the form of corrupted, stained flesh, and the most transcendent moments in the film tend to be those which focus on Nikolai's body. It helps, of course, that Nikolai is played by someone as apeshit crazy and brilliant as Mortensen. My God. Viggo. Ladling superlatives on his performance like he's just some Oscar chaser is the vilest kind of reduction, but the fact stands that this is a wildly successful characterization. His character, on paper, is fairly typical and simple, a dangerous man of violence, quiet even as he strangles the life out of you. We've all seen that character. Yet Mortensen plays that character with a dispassionate intensity, which is a paradox, until you see the film, that I've never quite seen before. His bearing is not in the least threatening or overpowering, his eyes are unfocused, but he still seems incredibly brutal, owing to small things like his general motionlessness, or the way he doesn't seem to look away, or the time that he puts a cigarette out on his fucking tongue, not because it is cool but because he genuinely doesn't seem to register that there are better ways of doing that. Mortensen is a character actor to end character acting. It was his innovation, apparently, to foreground the prison tattoos, and his seeming anxiousness to be hurt that leads to the film's absolutely most unforgettable moment. Now, this is a particularly brutal film, not so many violent scenes as in A History of Violence, but they are much harsher, from the incredibly nasty throat-cutting in the film's first minutes. But the piece de resistance is a late fight scene between Mortensen, who is nude, and two men, who are not, in a public bath. The rawness on display here, the ugly business of flesh being gouged and punched and sliced, is as overpowering as anything I've ever witnessed in the cinema, on a level completely removed from the bored fanboyism of slasher films, and much more visceral than the hyper-cinematic violence in a film by Scorsese or the like. It would be too much to credit Mortensen, although it could not possibly work without his contribution. More that it is the simplicity of the fight, no elegant choreography here, just men whomping into each other, and the brilliantly uncomfortable addition of the naked actor, emphasizing his physical essence and the damage being done to that physical essence. Outside of that scene and that actor, Eastern Promises is actually a bit flat, truth be told. For one thing, Naomi Watts gets nothing to do. Oh, she does it as well as she is able, but this is not a great part, and no actor could make it so. But really, there's just a lot of ennui on display. Maybe that's not the right word. I just can't feel that after the devilishly satisfying puzzle box that was A History of Violence, there's something a bit programmatic to the story here, and there's altogether less grand invention on the part of the director in most of the film. Make no mistake, it's a solid piece of thriller craftsmanship. But appreciating it is a bit too much an appreciation of technique and not the effect that technique creates. Part of it, I suspect, is that Cronenberg has never had to work in a study of place before, which is what this is. All of his films are first about people, inasmuch as the films explore the relationship between humans and environment, and they absolutely do. It's top-down, as it were, starting from the people's POV. Eastern Promises is very much invested in setting, and although Cronenberg does a very good job at capturing the details of place, the movie never quite makes the connection that the script wants, to describe how place influences people. Sure, characters talk about their world, but they never quite seem to be comfortable in it. So does this film come across as a finely tuned bit of adult entertainment wrapped around a hollow core? Not exactly. Smart thrillers for grown-ups are thin on the ground, after all, and anything that proceeds with the ruthless efficiency of Eastern Promises deserves praise. It's taut, to use one of the hoariest cliches one can use to describe a thriller. More importantly, it does have a core, just not the one that the screenplay would suggest. Nikolai, as embodied by Viggo Mortensen, an elemental force, like an angel of violence. We only partially get inside his head, but simply watching him smolder is exhilarating. It is not the mind-blowing experience that we so often get from the director, but Eastern Promises is a fine thriller anyway, brutal and relentless and exhausting. Working the late shift one evening just before Christmas, a midwife Anna Petrova, Naomi Watts, helps with a pregnant 14-year-old heroin addict who has just been brought into the emergency room. The baby is saved by an emergency C-section, but the mother dies. The only clue as to who she is lies in the diary she was clutching, written in Russian. When Anna's Russian uncle looks at the diary, he tells his young niece to bury it with the girl and refuses to translate it for her. Feeling sorry for the motherless infant and being pushed on by a miscarriage of her own, Anna follows the only clue she has to the girl's identity, a card to a Russian restaurant. The owner, Semyon, Armin Mueller-Stahl, claims not to know the girl but is willing to translate the diary for her. When Anna brings photocopies, Semyon is a bit upset and wants the original, even showing up unexpectedly at Anna's hospital to request it. That's because Semyon is a leader of the Russian mob in London, and the dead girl was a prostitute that he tricked into coming to England with promises of a singing career. In Anna's dealings with Semyon, she keeps on bumping into his drunken, nearly out-of-control son Kirill, Vincent Cassel, and the boy's driver and lackey Nikolai Lizin, Viggo Mortensen. Nikolai is quiet, tall, and handsome, and Anna is oddly attracted to him. When she learns just who and what Semyon is, she gives the diary to Nikolai. She reads the translation that her uncle reluctantly provided, however, and after understanding what the poor girl went through and who the father of the baby is, she can't just let it go. This film, though filled with Cronenberg's trademark blood and violence, is surprisingly subtle. Certain plot points that go a long way towards explaining people's motivations are given in quick throwaway lines, such as Anna's miscarriage, and the director expects his audience to pay attention because no one ever sits down and awkwardly explains just what's going on. The multi-layered script weaves the two plots, the one with Anna and a second one involving another mobster who is murdered on Kirill's orders, together nicely and illustrates each character's motivations without ever becoming heavy-handed. Something that Hollywood has an exceedingly hard time doing. The fact that this script is so good only magnifies the flaws that it contains. It's aggravating that the plot relies on cliched events that would fit right in with a Hollywood action flick. Anna falls in love with Nikolai and deep down knows that she can trust him because he gave her a ride home in the rain. Semyon's a tough and ruthless leader, but his son and heir to his criminal empire is a weak idiot who relies on his intelligent underling to keep him out of trouble. How many times have we seen that before? The worst offense is when Anna goes to the headquarters of the Russian mob and confronts Kirill and Nikolai and reveals the identity of the baby's father. What was she hoping to do? In real life they probably would have killed her, and the only reason this scene occurs is that the movie would be over otherwise. While events like this cause me to roll my eyes in lesser films, they're upsetting in a quality movie. Even with these flaws, the acting is superb. Viggo Mortensen has such screen presence in this movie that whenever he's on the screen you can't help but be intrigued. He plays the role so well that the revelation near the end doesn't seem cheap and forced. Armin Mueller-Stahl was also outstanding as the congenial older man who wants to help Anna and turns out to be a vicious mobster. He plays his part so coolly and with such restraint that I wouldn't be surprised to see him nominated for an Oscar. Naomi Watts is a very good actress, and she does fine in this role, but her male counterparts overshadow her performance. It might seem strange that a film so brimming over with realism and weighty moral issues should leave me puzzling over the title. I suspect that the good director might even have missed the point, but maybe many say that about Cronenberg. Videodrome, Crash, Existence. Easier to appreciate in retrospect. Then he shoots accessible stuff. A History of Violence was almost mainstream and combined critical success with good audience figures. Eastern Promises is a straightforward, well-made mobster movie. But I was left feeling it both exceeded and failed to reach expectations. The film begins with a rapid shape-shifting and manipulation of audience emotion worthy of Almodovar. We are shocked at the violence, thrown into grief by the terrible story of a young mother who dies on the operating table, and catapulted into warm fuzzies over the silver lining birth of her child. Cronenberg has learnt that crafting such a heady opening cocktail of feelings leaves us like soft putty in his hands. And fortunately the story never flags from there on. Naomi Watts plays a lovely young nurse. She helps with the birth of the child, sees the death of the mother, and promptly steals her diary. Viggo Mortensen is a menacing-looking gopher for the Russian mob. They want the diary contents to remain secret. Naomi's uncle, like the dead mother, is Russian, which provides a foreboding of nasty goings-on, all executed with exceeding flair. Here's another good things about it. The Godfather spawned many inferior Italian mafia copies, but where is the definitive Russian mafia movie? Mostly they boast cardboard stooges for Western film stars to trounce, e.g. Snatch. The research done by Mortensen and Cronenberg pays off handsomely. These are the most convincing mobsters I hope you never meet. A fight scene, featuring Mortensen naked in a men's bathhouse, is one of the best fight scenes ever made. The background on the workings of the mob, especially a code of tattoos and a system of qualifications, is unsettlingly authentic. Many of the actors are Eastern European, and even Mortensen acts very convincingly in Russian. The moral dilemmas are supposed to be about honor between thieves. Naomi Watts is torn by her hatred of a man in whom she suspects a level of decency and whom she finds attractive. Although she performs it well, her portrayal of a similar predicament is stronger in her acting audition scene in Mulholland Drive. But what a consummate actress! Did Cronenberg simply not stretch her enough? Or did he want to keep Eastern Promises as a plot-driven movie? A touch more melodrama could have given it a broader audience and also room to explore more heartrending themes than cheating the boss. For we are told early on that the dead mother, in her posthumous diary voiceover, was sold as a sex slave from Eastern Europe. The pitfall that most filmmakers fall prey to in that debate is getting caught up in the heated ban prostitution versus legislate and regulate argument. The uncontroversial work is preventing sex slavery at source, where girls are sold by friends and boyfriends under the pretense of a fine job waiting in the West. Even UN Goodwill Ambassador Angelina Jolie makes the mistake of demonizing men's desire in her film Inhuman Traffic, which can be seen at mtvexit.org. The strength of Eastern Promises is that it portrays the horror of the woman forced into prostitution but leaves the moral questions to the audience. I hope very much it will be seen by many in Eastern Europe. Thrillers can sometimes reach the masses better than a Goodwill film. The Inhuman Traffic website has an array of languages, but even its Russian download fails to subtitle the English dialogue. Ideological conflict over prostitution and trafficking is so contentious that networking and coalition among anti-trafficking initiatives is often hampered. A small film like this could promise more than entertainment in countries at risk. It could warn people of empty promises that could ruin their lives. I know I say this in pretty much every one of my Cronenberg reviews, but man, I love Cronenberg. I first saw this film a few years after it came out, back when I had just graduated high school, and I remember really liking it, but never really going back to rewatch it again for whatever reason. Recently, there have been rumors of a sequel to this movie, and when I first heard that, I was a bit confused. Furthermore, the rumors say that the sequel will be done without Cronenberg or Mortensen's involvement. That's essentially a non-sequel in my opinion, but nevertheless, I felt as if I needed to revisit this film to see if A, the movie held up to what I remembered, and B, if a sequel would be necessary. It's not necessary without Viggo or Cronenberg. I knew that before going in, but a rewatch has completely convinced me how stupid it would be to make one. After a teenager dies in childbirth, the midwife who delivered her, Anna, Naomi Watts, King Kong, uses the teenager's diary to try to find the child's kin, but it leads her into dealings with a Russian crime family. Semyon, Armin Mueller-Stahl, Knight of Cups, head of the family, offers to translate the Russian diary for Anna, but Anna becomes nervous that in the wrong hands, the diary could be extremely dangerous. Along the way, Anna encounters Semyon's reckless son Kirill, Vincent Cassel, Black Swan, and his chauffeur Nikolai, Viggo Mortensen, a history of violence. Alright, so, when we talk about mob movies, there are usually two categories. You could break them up more, but for the sake of argument just roll with me. You've got your actiony mob movies like The Equalizer or John Wick, and then you've got your drama mob movies like Once Upon a Time in America or The Godfather. I'm not going to lie, if I'm in the right mood, I can enjoy both types of mob movies. Crime films are something I just generally enjoy. This film falls into the drama category. There are some scenes with pretty graphic and brutal violence, but this is no Untouchables. There aren't any shootouts on the stairwell of Grand Central Station. The violence in this film is oftentimes grounded, slit throats behind closed doors, or assassination attempts when people are most vulnerable. This movie isn't about making you feel exhilarated when you get to the action scenes. It's about terrifying you by showing you the violence that these people are capable of. One thing I love about the direction of this film is the amount of subtlety that goes into every scene, particularly the scenes in the restaurant owned by the family. Whenever Semyon talks to his son Kirill, Nikolai, or even Anna, we get a sense of danger. Almost every word he speaks seems to have a double meaning. One of my favorite scenes comes when Semyon talks to Nikolai and Kirill about something that went wrong earlier in the film, and as the three of them talk, it becomes incredibly apparent that Nikolai has his head on straighter than Kirill. The respect that Semyon ostensibly feels towards Nikolai is apparent almost immediately, and the tone of the scene switches without ever saying explicitly what happened. There are lots of moments like this, where the implication of the scene is more important than what happens in the scene itself. You have to pay attention to really catch everything, because not every detail is laid out for you on the surface. It makes you work for it, and those are the best kinds of films in my opinion. Acting is another thing that is pretty fantastic in the movie. The leads are all great. Naomi Watts and Viggo are the standouts, though Mueller-Stahl absolutely holds his own as the ominous figurehead of the family. My only complaint as far as the acting goes is that Vincent Cassel really overacts in this movie. I usually don't mind Cassel. I thought he was fine in Black Swan and even Ocean's 12, though the film itself was subpar, but in this film his performance reminded me more of his subpar work in Brotherhood of the Wolf, a silly, schlocky French werewolf movie, though it does have some fun parts. He simply oversells nigh every line, to the point where some of the scenes become almost silly. After a Russian teenager in London dies while giving birth, a midwife named Anna, Naomi Watts, finds a journal in the young girl's bag that helps give her clues to everything leading up to this. And this makes Anna run into a Russian mob family who might have had something to do with it. So we get to see Anna trying to find out exactly what happened, while we also follow a man named Nikolai, Viggo Mortensen, who's kind of the driver/fixer for this mob family as he tries to do his job for them while also forming a little bit of a connection with Anna. And I won't really say anything else about the plot itself because that would kind of be going into spoilers. I can however say that I found the plot infinitely interesting and captivating. The events that unfold before the viewer's eyes are all perfectly handled and helps to tell a dramatic and surprisingly psychological plot. I'm not saying it's trying to mindfuck you, but it definitely uses a bit more brain than most crime stories. Never did I find myself bored during this movie. My eyes were pretty much glued to the screen the entire time. The characters in this movie, it's difficult to call any of them 100% good guys. Even Anna, who is pretty much the main character, has some shades of gray to her. But even though none of them are really perfect/good, I can at least understand where they're coming from. I fully understand their motivations and thoughts throughout. Naomi Watts is great as Anna, really nothing else I can say about it, she's great. However, I can definitely speak more about Viggo Mortensen as Nikolai. He is absolutely fantastic in this movie. It's also kind of a daring performance for him since he is an American playing a Russian. But I honestly had no problem with it because of a few reasons. One of the reasons is that he perfectly nailed the accent, second was that he actually spoke a bit of Russian in the movie, and third is because his performance did everything right as well. I was especially impressed after what he did/went through in a scene that's late in the movie, no spoilers. Vincent Cassel plays a man who works together with Nikolai and he was great as well. Then we also have Armin Mueller-Stahl as the boss of the mob family, and he was absolutely terrific in his role as too. Everybody in the movie did a great job, really. The score for the movie was composed by none other than Howard Shore, who everybody knows from the Lord of the Rings movies. And once again, he fucking nailed it with the music for the movie. And while the score for Eastern Promises isn't as huge and extravagant as in Lord of the Rings, it's still a great piece of music that has been created perfectly for the movie it's used in. It's very low-key, but it's still great. This movie was directed by David Cronenberg, who also made the excellent A History of Violence, side note, also starring Viggo Mortensen. And he did a terrific job with the directing of this movie. It's very smooth, it has a lot of long-ish takes that lets you see everything that happens and even notice details that are in the background. The movie is also very violent, so any person who hates violence in movies or can't watch a lot of blood on screen might want to stay away. I will warn you already, this movie is rated R but borders heavily on NC-17. And while that doesn't ruin any part of the movie for me, I am just saying it as a warning for people who might not be able to take that stuff. I remember Eastern Promises as a blunt physical force. The standout scene, the frightening naked knife fight in the Turkish baths, threw me back. The total effect of the harrowing story and grim subject matter not only took the wind out of me, but it also kept me down. I recall that first viewing in fall 2007 as a moving, even distressing film-going experience, so when Aaron initiated our David Cronenberg retrospective, I was intrigued to revisit Eastern Promises after all these years, to see if the film has retained its power. Eastern Promises is a remarkable film, an affecting crime drama, an idiosyncratic mob thriller, and an important later work in Cronenberg's eclectic yet thematically consistent oeuvre. First of all, the film's narrative is tightly plotted and well constructed. Information is carefully doled out and aspects of character are revealed slowly and often implicitly. Eastern Promises explores the bifurcated world of Russian immigrants in contemporary London, one hemisphere being that of the Russian mafia, or Vori v Zakwan, thieves-in-law, and the other being that of ordinary civilians. Anna, Naomi Watts, a midwife at Trafalgar Hospital, is drawn into the criminal underworld when a young Russian teenager dies under her care while giving birth to a baby girl. The youth appears to have been a drug addict and prostitute, and Anna's efforts to translate the youth's diary. Anna has Russian heritage but does not possess the language, lead Anna to Semyon, Armin Mueller-Stahl, the owner of a Russian fine dining establishment with connections to the Russian mafia operating in London. We soon meet Semyon's no-good son Kirill, Vincent Cassel, and Kirill's driver Nikolai, Viggo Mortensen, an imposing henchman with a mysterious quality about him. Aaron has already praised Cronenberg as an extremely effective narrative storyteller who never gets enough credit for the clarity of his storytelling. This is certainly true for Eastern Promises, which clocks in around 1¾ hours. However, part of the credit for the film's effective narrative has to go to the screenwriter, Stephen Knight, who is a well-known British writer of many crime and historical films and television shows, e.g., Dirty Pretty Things, Locke, Peaky Blinders. In fact, the only discernible flaw in the plot of Eastern Promises is the repeated coincidence of Anna and Nikolai happening to cross paths at the hospital at opportune moments, but it's the sort of contrivance that stands out mostly because the rest of the plot is so well crafted. While Cronenberg certainly benefits from Knight's script, Cronenberg's own formal talents are on full display in Eastern Promises. By the early 2000s, Cronenberg was at the top of his abilities and was entering his prestige phase. In this period, Cronenberg seems to construct his films with formal skill, apparent ease, and understated confidence. In Eastern Promises, Cronenberg demonstrates the proficiency of learned expertise. Here is a talented filmmaker at the summit of his formal craft and resources. For example, the shot choices and communication of information to the audience in the very first scene, which depicts a mob hit, are impeccable. The film opens with a shot of a sign reading Azim's Barbers. The camera pans right and cranes down to show a rainy city street crowded with stalls and a figure running through the rain towards the barbershop door. We notice another sign reading Joy Indian Cuisine. Setting and tone have been conveyed quickly and elegantly. Immigrant London, something criminal is afoot. The camera stops with the figure, a teenaged boy, in front of the door. Now, consider the shot choices once the camera moves inside the barber shop. In the second shot, we see whom we presume is Azim and another man in the barber's chair. The boy opens the door and comes inside, and we immediately wonder how this is going to play out. Something bad is going to happen, but to whom, and by whom? As the barber and customer chat in the foreground, the boy closes the window blinds in the background. Cronenberg then reverses the camera angle to the previous shot of the door from the outside, showing the boy turn the open sign to say closed and pulling down the door's blind, and we immediately know he is the one to do something. Now, to whom? Shot 4 reverses the angle but holds focus, in medium-long framing, on the boy, and now we definitely know the boy is going to do something bad. Shot 5 shows Azim and the customer from the boy's angle. The men continue to chatter until the customer interjects, "How much you taking off?" Shot 6, the boy looks scared in a close-up, and says, "Uncle." Azim. In 6 shots equaling roughly 40 seconds, with minimal dialogue, we know what is going to happen in the scene. Azim has asked the boy to do something that scares him, to kill the customer, an act foreshadowed by the innocuous question that now sounds ominous, "How much you taking off?" A lot, in fact, mostly off the throat. It's simple storytelling, but flawless. On other occasions, Cronenberg uses cuts to thematically link scenes. For instance, fairly early on in the film, Naomi runs away from an argument with her uncle Stepan, Jerzy Skolimowski, at the dinner table. Cronenberg smash cuts to a fancy feast at Semyon's restaurant during a time of celebration. The cut signals some connection and resemblance between the two worlds, that of the regular Russian immigrants and that of the Russian mafia, but more importantly their contrast. This is a theme that Cronenberg develops throughout Eastern Promises. In the film, Cronenberg certainly brings his unique sensibilities and preoccupations to the mobster genre. As the story develops, it becomes clear that Cronenberg and Knight are not interested in taking a common thematic approach in crime movies, namely blurring the lines between criminals and ordinary people, as a filmmaker such as Scorsese frequently does. Michael Mann similarly blurs distinctions between criminals and cops in his films. Instead, the mob world is increasingly framed as a strange, dark, even hellish underworld, an enclosed sphere or deep pit that sucks outside people in rather than extends throughout and underneath all of society. A film like Goodfellas operates by drawing the viewer in with the appeal and allure of the mob life, before reversing the protagonist's fate to make us confront his evil choices and their consequences. Having drawn us in, Scorsese works to indict the viewer alongside his characters. In contrast, Eastern Promises does not represent greater society as being morally culpable. Nevertheless, the underworld is a place that can draw anyone in, so there is dark potential lurking beneath people. The main reason for this distinct approach to the crime genre seems to be Cronenberg's privileging of his constant preoccupations over the usual themes of crime movies. Most notably, Cronenberg grafts body horror onto the violence of mob movies. In Eastern Promises, throat-cutting, a conventional method of execution in mob movies, is conducted slowly, without undue ease, as the camera watches unflinchingly. Similarly, a knife in the eye in the climactic fight scene is similarly observed with an unhindered, patient view. The instances of body horror in the film are connected to Cronenberg's thematic preoccupation with metamorphosis. In the second scene of Eastern Promises, spilling blood on a pharmacy floor frames pregnancy as body horror in a callback to the horrifying birthing dream sequence in The Fly. In a following scene, the newborn baby on the hospital table is shown in close-up, the camera carefully taking in the tiny person's desperate breathing as well as the bodily fluids spattered across the frail form. The newborn struggles to survive and move on to infancy, while the mother fades. One life's ascension is contrasted with another's declination to death. Body horror and metamorphosis also affect Cronenberg's portrayal of sex trafficking, which makes Eastern Promises much deeper and moral than most Hollywood depictions of prostitution, which tend to, whether consciously or unconsciously, present prostitution as sexy and therefore something fun and appealing. In Eastern Promises, the girls' bodies tell their tragic stories. As Anna reads the diary and we hear the voice of a young girl in a Russian village tell about being hoodwinked and sold into the sex trade, the voice is that of Tatiana Maslany, of Orphan Black fame. We see bodies in states of physical degradation, as the forced injections and rape take their toll. When Kirill takes Nikolai to his father's stable, the setting is remarkably unglamorous and unsexy. The women look sad, Cronenberg's steady framing adding no glamour or polish, no excitement through a flurry of fast cuts and body shots. When Nikolai is required to have sex with a girl while Kirill watches on, Nikolai takes her from behind, but it's decidedly unattractive. He hunches over her arched body and grunts. There is none of the unrealistic, pornographied ease of doggy style in most Hollywood movies. This is sex trafficking as body horror, a plague which leads to the physical degradation of the poor slave women and moral devolution of the criminal men. The naked knife fight is the most exciting scene in the movie, but it uses nudity not for titillation. It's certain to be unsatisfying for prurient eyes seeking out Viggo's full view, but rather to expose the raw vulnerability of the human body. Nikolai is attacked in a Turkish bath by two Chechen thugs with knives, and he has to defend himself with nothing but his skin and bone. He receives scores of wounds on his tattooed body, even if he manages to inflict worse on his enemies. This botched hit job is one of the most gripping and memorable scenes of violence in a mob movie, but it has thematic weight in addition to suspense and excitement. Cronenberg invites the viewer to compare Nikolai's frenetic self-defense in the flesh to his earlier self-display, in only boxer shorts, as he is judged by the Vors, to see whether he will become a made man and receive the star tattoos that signal the transformation in the Russian mafia, and which are used later on to mark him for execution in the bath. Cronenberg makes sure to show the tattoos being seared into Nikolai's flesh. The mobsters, like the prostitutes, wear their stories on their bodies. The film ends with views on repression and family. Cronenberg's framing in the final scene makes clear that Kirill is motivated by love for Nikolai, and that Nikolai exploits that erotic tension to his benefit. It's an interesting subplot in a mob movie, and makes a bit more explicit the homoerotics that color other works in the genre. The interest in repression is also standard Cronenberg. What are we to make of the strange family framing at the end, as Nikolai, who has been revealed to be a cop deep undercover, holds Anna, with the prostitute's baby between them, before they must part ways? Is Cronenberg showing us the family that could have been, the family that a perhaps less daring story and more conventional, less harsh vision would have made the happy ending? At the same time, it's a gesture at the importance and health of the ordinary, fundamental human unit against an underworld of false or forced loyalties, human exploitation, and bonds of hate. Eastern Promises serves as an important later Cronenberg text, containing interesting variations on his main themes as well as generic innovations. Can people be good to each other? This question has tickled the brain cells of many an intellectual and artist over the last few centuries. Perhaps the question is more applicable than ever in these days of senseless warfare, racial hatred, political turmoil, and all the other usual things liberal arts students are supposed to be livid about. Director David Cronenberg, director of recent Can Love Child, A History of Violence, and of the seriously brilliant Videodrome, sets the bar high once again in this moody film dealing with a spectrum of human interaction set against the grim, vodka-stained underworld of the Russian mafia. While Eastern Promises may never answer my question, it was a killer riff on the human condition. The film revolves around two opposing camps coming to terms with the death of a young pregnant woman. In one corner sits Anna, a midwife delicately portrayed by Naomi Watts, and her suburban Russian Anglo family. Across from Watts in the much darker corner of the ring broods Nikolai, played by contemplative and very badass-looking Viggo Mortensen. The driver for the son of the head of London's Vorovyzhokon, a family of Russian criminals, Nikolai is a quiet, dangerous outsider working his way up the Russian gang's staircase of leadership. The death of the pregnant woman leaves only a baby and diary, both of which could incriminate the Russians by illuminating certain, more sordid aspects of their criminal behavior. The film then builds its incredibly dark tension by placing Anna's family, and the innocent child, in increasing danger from a gang of killers intent on continuing a certain style of life very much outside the law. All the while we are drawn to by Nikolai, a respectable killer much in the style of Jeff Castillo, the cooler-than-a-melting glacier hitman protagonist of the Jean-Pierre Melville staple Le Samurai. In classic Cronenberg style, the film's narrative is full of dark turns, while the symbolic subtext behind characters' Russian prison tattoos creates a commentary on a compelling, sad, and beautiful aspects of international crime. In the Russian mafia, each member's past actions and crimes are embellished upon them in tattoos. A cross indicates high rank, a shovel for your years in a prison camp, etc. Cronenberg uses this aspect of true Russian crime to startling visual effect, offering an almost Shakespearean version of familial obligation in which marks of ink denote ultimate loyalty. Throughout the film, the tattoos of Mortensen and his cronies offer some of the film's most stunning photography, while adding danger and mystique to the characters who sport them with ghastly pride. Among a rut of mediocre Hollywood fare, Eastern Promises stands out as an intense character-driven personal piece, a look at a sordid world of throat-cutting, statutory rape, and drunk Russian murderers. I can't really praise this movie enough in 500 words, but I shouldn't have to, since any self-respecting fan of sincere and worthy cinema should see whatever Cronenberg releases as a matter of principle. If you want to see badass tattoos, a baby in danger, Viggo Mortensen naked, or a man get stabbed in the eye, you should take your $6.50 down to Distinta and see Eastern Promises. And if this review still leaves you with doubts about seeing it, stay home, it's probably too cool for you anyways. Movies about gangsters, you expect a lot of noise. Shouting and screaming. Barrages of gunfire. Not here. Here we have somber reflection, the lurking grey peril of an urban underbelly, shifty glances and unspoken threats. Eastern Promises is almost silent, even its title sounds like a shush. Terror swells inexorably and unavoidably, like the ebb and flow of the Thames River along the banks of which much of this story, with its title unease, takes place. And the slow creeping gloom of it lingers like a chill you can't shake. It's with the quietest hospital emergency room scene imaginable that the film opens. No doctors yell, no machines ping or bleep, it's in that frosty calm that a 14-year-old girl dies just as her baby is born. Midwife Anna, Naomi Watts, the painted veil, King Kong, takes up the newborn's cause, seeking out the family, if she can, of the unidentified teenager. A business card in the girl's bag leads her to a Russian restaurant run by Semyon Armin Muellerstahl, Mission to Mars, the 13th floor, whom we can tell right off is a bad lot. He's all about the stealthy threat of an old man who survived a long time in a dangerous situation. His son, Kirill, Vincent Cassel, Ocean's 13, Derailed, is a violent hothead held just barely in check by his driver and just about friend, Nikolai, Viggo Mortensen, Hidalgo, the Lord of the Rings, the Return of the King. They're all members of the Russian mob that has its tendrils snaking deep into the sordid side of the city. And the more Anna learns about them and about their connection to the dead girl and the baby, the more she pushes back at their menace, and the more we fear for what she's daring. That fear has a strange and thrilling ebb and flow of its own, though, because we're never quite sure what to make of Nikolai, who becomes Anna's most regular contact with this particular gang. He delves into the most appalling tasks with relish, it seems, and yet declines to engage in some of the perks of his work that, we suspect, a man like him, like what we believe him to be, would consider the best benefits of his position. Nikolai moves through his life with an odd brand of gentlemanliness that is as disconcerting as it is fascinating. Mortensen's performance is as extraordinarily intense as always, but with even more layers of irony and mystery than he's brought before. This second pairing with director David Cronenberg is even more powerfully, magnificently disturbing than their first joint effort, 2005's A History of Violence. In one astonishing scene, two assailants armed with knives attack Nikolai at a very, exposed moment, one that leaves Mortensen nearly as vulnerable as his character, and reveals better than ever how insanely dedicated Mortensen is to his craft. His performance and the gradations of uncertainty that he gives to Nikolai are part of what makes this one of the best movies ever about life in the mafia. Mortensen and Cronenberg get a lot of help, it must be said, from the virtuoso script by Stephen Knight, who also wrote the grim and glorious Dirty Pretty Things, also about an unseen criminal underside of London. The layering of ironies isn't just Mortensen's doing. In one exquisite moment, Semyon describes his adopted hometown thusly: "It never snows here, and it's never hot. London, city of whores and queers." That's not just a beautifully ugly metaphor for neither here nor there-ness or a beautifully ugly description of a place by a man who believes himself more moral than those around him. It's a beautifully ugly moment of unwitting self-satire by a man who condemns what he has helped create. He runs whorehouses. Of course, it spoils nothing to reveal that the dead girl had run away from one of them. Paradoxes and incongruities and biting, and quiet, mockery abound here. Easter Promises pulls no punches and drops little bombs of verbal and plot violence without warning, threatening menace of its own as it constantly forces you to reconsider everything it is and everything it's saying. It rarely goes where you expect, and ensures that the road it takes to get you there is as bumpy and uncomfortable as it can be. And that is a wonderful thing. Eastern Promises is David Cronenberg's film starring Viggo Mortensen, Vincent Cassel, and Naomi Watts. The script is written by Stephen Knight, better known for Amazing Grace, 2006, and Locke, 2013, and the film starts with a young Eastern European girl dying during childbirth, leaving her baby girl and a diary behind, which is then taken into care/examination by a nurse called Anna Watts at a London hospital. Upon the diary's examination, Anna discovers that it is very probable that the young girl has suffered badly at the hands of certain individuals, which takes her deep into the seat of a London-based Russian mafia and its operation. Cronenberg's feature is a neat and powerful portrayal of London's underworld, even though, most of the time, many things are implied, rather than overtly presented. Nikolai, Viggo Mortensen, works as a chauffeur for a crime syndicate run by Semyon, who is also the owner of a popular Trans-Siberian restaurant in central London. Semyon's son Kirill, Vincent Cassel, is also in the criminal group, which, among other things, is engaged in human and drug trafficking. In the background of merry traditional Russian songs and Russia-themed restaurant events, we hear of gruesome backdoor dealings, and in a traditionally Eastern European sauna there are scenes of despicable, though exaggerated violence. In this representation, Cronenberg more than excels himself, being pretty much in his comfort zone dealing with the most perverted and darkest natures of humanity. See his film Crash, 1996. There is plenty of attention to detail in the film, for example, the tattoos. Nikolai displays a Russian church and cupolas on his back as a large tattoo, with the number of domes on the church indicating the number of prison terms received. Apart from his cupolas, Nikolai has numerous sayings: a snake with a dagger, a skull with flowers, a hot cross button and a black raven on the other parts of his body. Cronenberg himself says that tattoos suddenly became an intense metaphor and symbol in the movie, and they are tied to an older Russian criminal caste with a real structure and hierarchy. Of course, the tattoos in the film are also in tune with Cronenberg's already established trademarks: the intense preoccupation with bodily disfiguration, Videodrome, 1983, and People's Metaphorical, Spider, 2002, or literal, The Fly, 1986, transformation into animalistic creatures. Undoubtedly, Eastern Promises is comparable to the Cronenberg's 2005 feature film A History of Violence, also starring Viggo Mortensen. Both film stories deal with the topic of a violent, organized syndicate and its impact on an ordinary family's life, and have gruesome, often over-the-top violent sequences. Interestingly, both films feature an individual who has ties to both a bad underworld populated by ruthless, cunning individuals, and the world of ordinary citizenry who are committed to the idealistic notions of justice and do no harm, and it is this connection which is accentuated so well in Cronenberg's films. In A History of Violence, we see Tom Stahl, Viggo Mortensen, an individual who, at the first glance, appears an ordinary family man, but who hides a deep secret, an unforgiving dark past. In Eastern Promises, there is Nikolai, a man who plays on both sides of the game, being an almost career criminal, going through the Siberian Gulag to emerge as a person of respect in the world of Vori v Zakwan, while, at the same time, maintaining his post as an undercover agent for the British intelligence. It is not only in their content that A History of Violence and Eastern Promise are similar, but also in their presentation and shot sequences. Cronenberg opens both films with a graphic violence sequence. In A History of Violence, we see two men on a murder spree, while in Eastern Promises, there is a man being butchered right in the hairdresser's saloon. Also, often, the hero in both stories is left absolutely defenseless, and at a complete disadvantage vis-a-vis his opposition. In A History of Violence, Tom has to defend himself barehanded against store robbers, while in Eastern Promises, completely naked barehanded Nikolai defends himself against Caucasian hitmen in a sauna. Eastern Promises may lack the theatrical neatness, methodological approach, and the exciting focus on the characters of A History of Violence, but, still, each scene of Eastern Promises is meticulously constructed, well thought out, and there is plenty of hidden tension behind every shot. The actors contribute to the picture's success. Viggo Mortensen fits the role well as Nikolai, the driver for the criminal organization, who is too cool for any occasion, smartly dressed and soft-spoken. He is the kind of a reserved, loyal servant any criminal band based on honor and respect would be lucky to have. Mortensen's character is almost an opposite of Vincent Cassel's. Cassel's Kirill is hot-blooded and irresponsible, and the actor managed to convey the impression just right, though his Russian accent is very far from perfect. Naomi, what's cast as a caring nurse Anna, is an interesting choice, initially raising concerns, but redeeming herself tenfold as the film progresses. Watts's character is too good-hearted and, initially even opening up to Semyon, never thinking that anyone can do that much harm to anyone, though slowing beginning to realize the real danger that the little girl left behind is facing. Eastern Promises may appear to end abruptly without a proper explanation or resolution, but Cronenberg is known for his relatively short movies, and upon the second or third viewing, the film's seemingly unfinished ending becomes more understandable. It is understandable in a way that it becomes clear when remembering the past dialogues of the characters what has likely happened in the end, even though the audience never gets to see the finished product. There is also a hint of romance between Anna and Nikolai in the end, who never quite felt indifferent to one another, and Anna, as the quote above suggests, seems to have developed a morbid fascination towards Nikolai's cool demeanor and a sense of danger and mystery about him. Besides, Cronenberg's ability to set the right atmosphere of the film redeems the film's uncertain nature and open questions. In Eastern Promises, we taste a bit of the Russian culture. Nikolai tries to repair Anna's motorcycle Ural, while Semyon serves homemade borscht to his guests, hosting a pensioner's birthday during which a man dressed in a traditional Russian clothes sings Oki Cherny, Dark Eyes, a traditional Russian table song, and guests give vodka toasts. Eastern Promises may be unrealistic in some way and too exaggerated in some scenes with a very uncertain ending, but the film is also entertaining, with good acting, flawless dialogue sequences, a neat, powerful presentation and one unforgettable dark atmosphere. I have a confession. While watching Eastern Promises, I found it generic and disliked this new Cronenberg. David Cronenberg, one of the top directors of our generation, used to have this obsession with flesh, or the new flesh, as he sometimes calls it in his movies. He changed his tone a bit when he made Spider in 2002, and even though I adore the movie, something was missing, the director's obsession with the grotesque. He followed this with A History of Violence, which I found to be good, but weak for the director. Then I was thinking during Eastern Promises that this was his weakest film I've seen. I've yet to see a film from him that I disliked. Then the third act emerged, forced me to revise what I expected of the movie and to decide what the movie was actually about, and I was silent for a good 10 minutes or so after the final cut to black and credits. I also have an apology. I'm sorry, Mr. Cronenberg, that I ever doubted you. The trailer has led me, and others, to believe the movie is about one thing, but let me give a plot summary that is not misleading. Anna, Naomi Watts, is a nurse who finds a diary on a girl who died during childbirth. She can't read Russian, the movie is set in Russia, but her uncle can and starts to translate it. When he deciphers the address, Anna brings it to Semyon, Armin Mueller-Stahl, who has connections with Kirill, Vincent Cassel, and Nikolai, Viggo Mortensen, a gangster and his chauffeur, respectively. Anna hopes to find the dead girl's family so that the child may not fall into the endless cycle of a foster home. However, Semyon is involved with some very dangerous individuals, and it may not be a good idea to let him have the baby. This story plays out in an interesting query of what is right and wrong, and poses another intriguing question: can one do the right thing, even though he's doing something bad? In effect, under particular circumstances, can the end justify the means? Now, don't get me wrong, Cronenberg still has a thing for graphic violence and sex. Scenes from History of Violence or one from Eastern Promises may not immediately beckon Cronenberg's 1996 film Crash, but after seeing it right before or after Promises, I felt a connection. In addition, the gangster's numerous tattoos are suggestive of Vaughn's body art and mangled flesh in Crash. The sauna fight and opening scene are just as brutal as the kills in History. Cronenberg even has a few touches of the flesh, like one shot that concentrates on the umbilical cord of the newborn baby. Then the themes of the movie magically transpire and tie in to those great images and scenes. Appropriately set at Christmas, the story ends up being about sacrifice and making other people happy rather than only thinking of oneself. The movie consistently features scenes of challenging rank, disrespect, and violence, of course, usually all done in the name of doing what someone thinks is right. Word has probably already spread about the sauna scene. I won't explain it, but I will add to what's there. Even though the scene at the bathhouse is violent, film geeks will find it somewhat humorous. The set design is reminiscent of 8½, one of my all-time favorites, about a film director resorting to his daydreams to keep his sanity, and the fighting reminded me of Torn Curtain, which features a long death scene to show how long it really takes to kill somebody. Both are appropriate in their own way, and I smiled, despite the carnage. At the end, after we realize what is happening and we are oddly moved, Kirill tells Nikolai, "Let's go out and celebrate. Happy New Year!" At this moment, we can feel a certain cleansing, a renewal. At another point, Anna explains to Nikolai, sometimes birth and death go together. The whole scene is beautiful, and the denouement only makes us care even more about the characters and their continuing story. For once, I experienced sentiment in a Cronenberg movie. As he has aged, he has found a new way of expressing himself, and if he continues speaking this language the way he did in Eastern Promises, even though some of his older, more grotesque movies are classics, he should go for it. I began with a quote, so I will close with the last line of the movie, which is what left me speechless, along with the image of Nikolai sitting alone at a table in a restaurant. "This is why I left, to find a better life." I've gotten so used to watching great mob movies depicting ruthless Italians, Goodfellas and The Godfather, that I've forgotten other cultures have their own organized crime syndicates too. The Chinese and Japanese have some mean people doing some very bad things. So do the Colombians. But the cake has to go to the Russians. These guys are the epitome of badass. Eastern Promises is a congealed story involving a Russian crime family that have taken their base of operations to London, under the guise of a classy restaurant, Trans-Siberian. The head of the family is Semyon, Armin Mueller-Stahl, a man with a cute, peaceful exterior and a sinister heart. He'll stop at nothing to protect his family, turf and way of life. His latest problem involves a diary, in which his rogue son Kirill, Vincent Cassel, has been named in as a rapist, kidnapper, pimp, drug smuggler, and murderer. This personal journal has found its way into the hands of a midwife named Anna Petrova, Naomi Watts, when she finds it in the belongings of a 14-year-old prostitute who has died while giving birth. To restore order, Semyon sends Nikolai, Viggo Mortensen, to retrieve the book and to tie up any loose ends that may yet still exist. And just like in A History of Violence, director David Cronenberg starts the ball rolling quickly with a few eye-opening, unexpected scenes. The first shows the brazen, yet nonchalant, attitude these individuals have towards murder, even if it's one of their own. The second bloody moment shows the desperation to and the futility of escape from these murderous people. Both play integral parts in the movie, in fundamentally different ways. The first thing to note is Cronenberg has obviously found his filmmaking niche. He intertwines the duality of good versus bad, dark versus light within his characters like few other directors. This is showcased perfectly by the central character of Nikolai. While he outwardly exhibits behavior showcasing his loyalty to the family as needed, he secretly tries to shy away from confrontation and from partaking in any questionable activities. Likewise, the character Anna Petrova is equally complex. She acts naive and doe-eyed when interacting with these evildoers, while at the same time she is rock solid in her stance to get what she wants. Both of these characters walk a very fine line while looking for weaknesses to exploit for power, Nikolai, and decency, Anna. And while most of the congratulations fall squarely on the shoulders of the actors and director, Eastern Promises really shines thanks to a well-written screenplay by Stephen Knight. The characters are fully developed and the plot is compelling and complex. I was completely immersed in the story within the first 5 minutes of screen time and never once lost interest. And while I'm not about to give anything away, the plot twists and turns are very smart and caught me completely unawares. My only point of contention lays in the way the film ends. The plot twists have unfolded and the characters have all seemingly gotten what they rightly deserved, but according to the setup, should they have? I wanted to see a different ending come out of it all, not one that seems so cut and dry. Other than that minor detail, there isn't a way for me to not recommend Eastern Promises. David Cronenberg and Viggo Mortensen have stepped up their games with this movie. They have firmly established themselves as some of the best Hollywood has to offer. Even though this won't make much of a ripple in the theaters, it will get its just rewards come time for the Academy Awards. I see several nominations in its future. While searching for information about an orphan baby, a midwife, Naomi Watts, crosses paths with a soldier, Viggo Mortensen, in the Russian mafia. Eastern Promises is a visceral, engaging film that, while not the equal of director David Cronenberg's previous effort, A History of Violence, still ranks as one of his best. From the opening sequence, Cronenberg makes his mark on the mafia film genre. While directors such as Coppola and Scorsese have explored the themes of family and brutality that run through life and organized crime, Cronenberg makes a point of showing the blood. This is a bloody movie and some will no doubt be put off by the violence, but those that can see past it will be rewarded with layered storytelling and one of the best performances in recent years. Viggo Mortensen does such a great job playing a low-level Russian gangster that he doesn't seem to be playing a Russian at all. His accent and mannerisms all feel real, and the haunting, hungry look in his eyes speaks volumes with a single glance. He never slips, never gives a hint of a Western accent, and never gives even a moment's reason to doubt his authenticity. If Eastern Promises has a weakness, it's that Stephen Knight's screenplay telegraphs its plot twists, thus robbing them of any real payoff. But this flaw is more than offset by Cronenberg's intricate visual style and Mortensen's knockout performance. Many films now considered modern classics premiered in 2007, There Will Be Blood, Juno, No Country for Old Men, and Zodiac chief among them. Another I frequently see mentioned is Canadian director David Cronenberg's Eastern Promises. In 2007 I was 14, so many of these modern classics didn't resonate with me in what I now assume is the intended way. Having returned to film in my early 20s, I'm stunned by them, except for Eastern Promises. Naomi Watts plays a curious London nurse who ends up delivering the baby of a dying, underage, Russian girl. Watts' curiosities lead her to take a diary found on the Russian girl's body and to find a translator. She goes to a distant acquaintance, who we quickly learn is the head of the major Russian mob family in London, where she also meets Viggo Mortensen's character, the family's undertaker and driver. The diary finds itself in the hands of many, including Mortensen's and the mob boss's son, an immature and volatile drunk. Over time, Watts learns the Russian girl's baby, for whom she has been caring since the girl passed, belongs to the mob boss himself due to an assault that occurs before the movie begins. As Watts plays detective, she gets herself and her family further involved, to the point that only Mortensen, who takes a shine to her the moment he sees her, when he presumes she's a prostitute, can wield his quiet, persuasive power to keep them safe. I won't comment on the plot twist, which nearly saves the film from its amalgamation of Hollywood Russian clichés and forced romance, but it does elevate Mortensen's role to a level that rightly earned him an Oscar nomination. Eastern Promises doesn't contend with There Will Be Blood, Juno, No Country for Old Men, Zodiac, or any of the other modern classics because it doesn't care deeply enough about developing its characters so fully they become people. It's too concerned with using them as a platform upon which to erect an intricate plot. I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse. If you like the Godfather/Mafia/organized crime type movies, I offer you Eastern Promises. Now kiss my hand and go see the movie when it comes out. But first, let me tell you a little more about it. The movie was good, not as groundbreaking or star-studded as The Godfather, but good nonetheless. It was a good story with good performances, especially from Viggo Mortensen. It had just the right amount of suspense, thrills, and drama to balance each other out. At well under 2 hours long, it was efficient and effective, something that is hard to do in modern cinema, especially in this genre. It's all about a cell of the Russian mafia in London, headed by Semyon Armin Mueller-Stahl, and fronted by a restaurant. A very young Russian girl skips town in search of a better, more exciting life in Western Europe, specifically London. Lured into Semyon's world through his son Kirill, Vincent Cassel, she is held captive, raped, and impregnated. As she goes into labor in very bad shape, she somehow escapes and is taken to a hospital. This is where Anna Petrova, Naomi Watts, gets entangled in the situation. Anna is a midwife who helps deliver the baby and pronounces the death of the mother. She is determined to find whatever family this baby might have. A business card that the mother had on her leads Anna to the restaurant where not only does she meet Semyon and Kirill, she also meets Nikolai, Viggo Mortensen. He is the driver, hitman, cleanup guy, and bodyguard for the organization. A strange connection is formed between them as he tries to do his duty and she skeptically tries to find the link between the mother and child and these people. And the plot thickens. The characters in this movie are quite stereotypical but the performances were not. Each of the actors were compelling in their roles but two of them really stood out. Armin as the Godfather figure was very impressive. He ranges everywhere from sweet, older, mild-mannered restaurant owner to ruthless, cold-blooded, cold-hearted mob boss with no remorse. He was convincing and genuine. Viggo did an even better job with his role. His performance was as smooth and sharp as his character. So was his accent. You can see how well he portrays this mysterious character who is struggling internally to find his purpose. There is a scene in the film that takes place in a steam room involving Nikolai that will make you squirm in your seat. By the way, this is a bloody movie, not like the British bloody but more like the American bloody as in a lot of blood in the movie. Shockingly, unless my memory fails me, there is little to no gunplay in this movie. These guys seem to have a thing for knives and heavy slicing, thus the blood. Take this into consideration if you get queasy easily. After all, this is a violent story and some of it is right in your face. Speaking of in your face, the look and feel of this picture were as you would expect, cold, wet, overcast, and gloomy. London was an appropriate location for this tale to take place. Big promises shipped back to Russian villages, telling women about dreams they can make reality in the bright lights of London. Those are Eastern promises, but the reality of sexual slavery and abuse in Russian mafia-controlled houses is horrifyingly different. Set in an underbelly of London just under grand restaurants and red buses, Eastern Promises is a typically tough and bloody gangster fable from David Cronenberg, which plays out like a nightmare fairy tale. It's the nightmare of midwife Anna Petrova, Naomi Watts. When a pregnant Russian teenager dies giving birth, the only clue she has to who her daughter's family might be is a Russian diary and a business card for a Russian restaurant. Anna, whose family are Russian immigrants, is offered help by grandfatherly restaurant owner Semyon Armin Mueller-Stahl. Seaman is all pleasant insistence that he can help, even as asks after every detail of her life. Because Seaman is a ruthless mafia kingpin, with a hapless son Kirill, Vincent Cassel, leaning on the emotional and practical support of his imposing, heavily tattooed driver Nikolai, Viggo Mortensen. As Anna is pulled further and further into Semyon's deadly world of death, could she have a surprising savior? Cronenberg's film, sharply scripted by Stephen Knight, is shot with a traditional stillness and a palette of strong colors, all of which reassuring visual language is utterly at odds with the skin-slashing violence at its heart. Eastern Promises opens with a Russian gangster practically having his head sawn off with a switchblade, in the hands of a mentally handicapped nephew of a minor Turkish gangster. There isn't a single gun in Eastern Promises. After all, that would be breaking British law. Instead, violence is meted out with the violent intimacy of a knife across the throat. The film's formal structure and framing, angles and cutting are kept simple, almost static, works brilliantly. As we watch throats slashed, grim sexual encounters or moments of imposing menace, the matter-of-fact presentation of these become more and more chilling. Eastern Promises feels like a bogeyman fable. Seaman's restaurant, all class and bright red walls, an ogre's cavern that leads us into an ever grimmer world of violence and mayhem. It's a world Anna is unprepared for. Determined and resilient, Naomi Watts' Anna is also undone by her politeness. How can she refuse an offer to help from someone as polite as Seaman? Watts does extremely well with a slightly underwritten role, a woman on a quest who slowly realizes how terrible the world she is peeking into is, but stops from trying to force through what she believes is right. Her disbelief, and out-of-place semi-innocence and sense of moral duty, make her stand out all the more in this terrible underbelly world, full of ogres and secret codes. At the center of is a monster. Armin Mueller-Stahl looks like your favorite uncle, but he quietly exudes cold, remorseless villainy. He's the sort of man who delights in cooking the finest borscht, playfully teases his granddaughter's violin playing and doesn't bat an eyelid about ordering a rival to be dismembered. Mueller-Stahl is terrifying as this man the audience instinctively knows is dangerous and will stop at no moral boundaries to get what he wants. Watch the steely-eyed kindness he asks Anna where she works, lives, and who she knows during their first meeting. The obvious moral void in Seaman makes the unreadable Nikolai even more intriguing. Played with an extraordinary physical and linguistic commitment by Mortensen, Nikolai's body is a tattooed walking advert of his past incapacity for violence, and he's the sort of relaxed heavy who is as unfussed with stubbing a cigarette out on his tongue as he is with snipping fingers off a corpse. Mortensen's skill here is to make us constantly unsure where the moral lines are for Nikolai. He is a confirmed killer, but he takes an interest in Anna. Is this sexual or protective? What does he make of his boss's brutality towards women? What does he think of his direct superior Kirill? Kirill is played with a larger-than-life weakness by Vincent Cassel in a thrilling performance that constantly shifts expectations. At first, he seems like a drunken blowhard with a capacity for thoughtless violence. But Cassel makes clear he is a weak man with some principles, bullied by his father, to whom he is a constant disappointment, desperate to prove he is more capable than he is. He has an emotional reliance on Nikolai laced with sexual fascination. He can barely keep his hands off him. Nikolai seems to accept this. But we don't seem to know why. His actions are constantly open to interpretation. Ordered to have sex with a prostitute, he almost apologizes to her after, left alone with her after Kirill has watched their sexual encounter. He's strangely tender. He urges Anna to keep her distance but follows orders with calm disinterest. How far will he go? What moral qualms does he have, if any? Mortensen's carefully judged performance is a masterclass in inscrutability in a film that plays its cards very close to its chest as to why he, and others, do the things they do. Cronenberg's entire film is structured like this. Is the dragon a dragon or a potential knight? Can Anna emerge from this semi-Linkian nightmare world and return to normal life, or will everything connected to her be destroyed by this world? Cronenberg's study of this shady, heartless world is masterful. The rules and code of this brutal Russian mafia world are excellently explored. And the film's formal style culminates in a stunningly violent but beautiful, if that's the right word, fight between a nude Mortensen and two knife-wielding Chechens in a Turkish bath that is a brutal model for how these things can be done. Eastern Promises resolves itself, after twists and turns, into something more comforting and traditional than you might expect. But is it a fairy tale ending to a nightmare? Either way, Cronenberg's mix of formality and unflinching gore is masterful, and in Mortensen it has a performance both relaxed and full of tightly wound violence. Tough but essential. This film. Directed by David Cronenberg. Screenplay by Stephen Knight. Produced by Paul Webster. Starring Viggo Mortensen. Cinematography Peter Sashitsky. Edited by Ronald Sanders. Music by Howard Shore. Production company's Focus Features. Distributed by Pathé Distribution. Release date September 8, 2007. Running time 101 minutes. Countries United Kingdom. Languages English. Budget $27 million. Box office $56.1 million.